Sword of Coming Chapter 960. Qingping Jianzong's Shanshui Mansion report is placed on the side of Yunjing Mountain and is temporarily in charge of Zhongqiu. In the future, Jinghua Shuiwe was placed on Sumyo Mountain by Chui Dongshan instead of Zhu Mountain with the best scenery, or Yunjing Mountain, which is the closest to the ferry. Unexpectedly, it is reasonable to say that Xindu Mountain is the place for sword training, and Yunjing Mountain Wufu learns boxing, both of which are pure. Chui Dongshan smiled and said, "Teacher, you are the accountant. It's better to look through the account books so that my husband and the ancestors of the Shangzong will have a good idea. Speak up and make everyone happy." Zongmen celebrations are not comparable to the opening ceremonies of ordinary Jindan monks. Those who come to congratulate are often rich and powerful Zongzi head sections. Near the sect of the Mountain Dynasty country, plus the vassal sect of the Immortal Mansion, various landscapes and gods for the sake of face, almost all gritted their teeth and gave a gift that does not lose their share. This is also the embarrassment of the Lushan Huangliang School and Yunxia Mountain as neighbors on the Aquarius Island. There are so many times to watch the ceremony, and they can only go out and not enter, which is equivalent to often actively sending money to Yunxia Mountain, which is shaped like a mountain of a vassal. A grieved, dull face and hurt the wealth of the treasury. Some immortal sects, especially not authentic, will specially arrange for people to roll the name and directly report the content of the gift, a few gods and treasures, and open the skylights to speak up, directly at the ceremony. It's clear that it's clear, for example. Aijo Pei Daifeng, due to the high ability of the fire dragon real person to accept apprentices, often hold celebrations. It is rumored that every time the celebration ends, the respected fire dragon real person often sends it personally. When the guest came down the mountain, the old real man looked kind, and he had to ask him if he had encountered difficulties at home recently. Zhongqiu smiled and nodded and took out an account book from his sleeve. This time Qingping Jianzong held the sect celebration, since the first invitation letter was issued. To this day in the most recent period of time, Mixiefeng the distinguished guests are like clouds, not counting the father and son of Aijo Lushur, and Mr. Yu of the Xianmi dynasty. The three of them are climbing on a temporary visit today. Mixiefeng has not arranged a place to live, and the remaining 32 distinguished guests will welcome the expenses of sending away. Adding the tea and melon seeds from the Patriarch Hall today, the total is $726. Fortunately for Huang Ting, she used to be spectators at various ceremonies in Taiping Mountain, which was similar to Tao Jiangxian's previous statement, as long as she sat and dozed off. But Huang Ting, who has a deep blessing fortune, doesn't have to worry about the immortal money anymore. She still knows what the concept of 720 taels of silver is. Yi Yunyun is the leader of Pushen Yunkatang. This Huang Yiyun likes to leave the general affairs to Tan Rong, Xuanhuan and the others to take care of them. If they don't deal with it specifically, she still has to look at them and nod their approval. Therefore Yi Yunyun is extremely knowing the expenses of a fairy house sect to hold a ceremony, arrange a place to stay for the guests. The daily hospitality of the fairy house, wine, tea, and the melons and fruits carefully cultivated by the farm monks are a large sum of money every day. The scene is beautiful, and the sect's spiritual energy consumed is a landscape picture that needs to be smashed forcibly with money, plus some monks who can't go to Pushan, so just throw them into an unreachable place with thin aura. Doesn't it delay their cultivation? And this requires Yun Chaotang to crush a large amount of snowflake money in advance, and water aura in advance in various fairy houses and snail shell ashrams to create a seat that is good for cultivation. According to the saying on the mountain, every breath of the monk's breath is money from the gods. It's not a joke. It's all money. In addition, some gifts are needed for the end of the celebration and the guests can bring down the mountain in return. On the mountain's accountant treasury, go to the local dynasty or other immortal mansions to buy some unique and elegant gifts. A viewing ceremony before and after. The total expenditure added together is an astronomical amount of fairy money. Once you really want to pay attention to the face of the clan and deduct the gift income, you may even be able to make ends meet. In the end, Qingping Jianzong did well, and it cost more than 700 taels of silver, not even a single snowflake. Chen Pinggan's face was sullen, and he still had the 6 silver coins. "How did you figure it out, master? This is a bit too much." Wei Wenlong sighed with emotion. It was also Mr. Accountant who learned what he learned, and if the seedling master didn't make a move, he was a blockbuster when he made a move. Born as a national teacher in Nanyuan, who is worthy of the old lotus root flower blessed land, Wei Wenlong sighed that he was not as good as he was careful. Zhongqiu turned over the first page of the account book, and the next is the gift income for this celebration. On the Daquan dynasty side, Li Shilin, the official book of the Ministry of Rites, was better than the old general Yao Zhen and Fuyin Yao Xianji, and then went to Mishu Peak. In addition to the 80 rein money he carried with him, Daquan Emperor Yao Jingji also took the initiative to make a promise with Qingping Jianzong. In the future, the Daquan dynasty will find a sword-repairing embryo in the borders and vassal countries in the future. It will immediately be sent to Xindu Mountain to practice sword training, and the money needed for sword refining will be paid by the Daquan household department. If Xindu Mountain is here, Bian is willing to collect Jianxiu as the direct disciples of Zhu Feng. Of course it is best. If it feels inappropriate, let them go back to the mansion and return to Daquan. However, His Majesty Daquan made one and only request, which is to call Xindu Mountain. Swordsman who was born in the future must go down the mountain to serve as the royal consecration of the Daquan dynasty, or the monk of the frontier army, for a period of at least 1 jiazi time. As the younger brother of Emperor Daquan, Yao Xinji, who is still serving as the Mirage City Mansionin, is actually the first time he knew about this. He finally understood a little bit why he would have a chair in Qingping Peak's Ancestor Hall. In addition to his personal friendship with Mr. Qin in the future, these sword repairmen from the Daquan dynasty will gradually enter Qingping sword sect. Then he is their patrons? Qin Pingan laughed and joked, "You kid, is too late to regret it now. Qingping Jianzong and Daquan dynasty are allies. There will be a seat for you in the Patriarch's Hall. If you change your seat, you will be sitting. So if you feel troublesome, thin-skinned, and worry that you are not qualified for this position, I can help discuss with Cui Dongshan, wait a few years, and then let your emperor recommend others. If it is not too troublesome, you can sit openly. Anyway, I'm just the mountain lord of Luapa Mountain, and not the lord of Qingping sword sect. If I encounter a dispute in the future, you can quarrel as much as you want. I don't need to quarrel with the Lord Shui. I can at least guarantee one thing. You will be here in the future. No matter who you are with, no matter how fierce the quarrel is, you don't have to worry about turning your face. There will be no less trivial matters in the future, but there will be no worries." Yao Xinji gathered the sound together and joked, "Mr. Qin, I have changed people and come to sit in my seat. How can they dare to make trouble sitting here? They will definitely not dare to take a breath, let alone fight with reason. It is estimated that occasionally we will come here to participate in discussions on behalf of our Daquan, and I am destined to sit here as a wooden person. It is not what Sect Master Chui said. This is not good. It is absolutely impossible. Besides, I am also familiar with Miss Pei, just like Mr. Qin that said, no matter how fierce the noise is when the door is closed, when the door is opened, it is still my own family." Yao Xinji glanced at the only hanging statue in Zhu Shirtang. Who dares to make trouble here? Sect Master Cui Dongshan was an immortal. Before that battle, the old master Xuanhuan of Yuguazang was known as the Fairyland. What's more, the current chief worshipper Miyu is still a Fairyland sword repairman, and even more so, the Miyu from the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Moreover, Mr. Qin has already made his meaning very clear. He is the grandfather of the Supreme Master, or Mr. COS Gentleman, coupled with the incense between Mr. Qin and Daquan, many times without Mr. Qin speaking, he is a kind of respect to the Daquan dynasty. Invisible favoritism. Zhongqiu continued, "Pushun Tanzhong Lu, this time to congratulate the mountain, 2 land deeds were sent. They are 2 enclaves far from Pushun and the nearest to Xindu Mountain. According to the most conservative valuation, they are worth at least 5,600 Gu Yuqian can be used as the opening of the Golden Core Monk's dojo. As for whether it can be opened into 2 smaller Xinjia ferry crossings, more detailed investigation is needed for the time being." Yi Yunyun smiled and said, "Tan Rong has discussed this with me in advance. According to my personal opinion, it is actually enough to take out a land deed, but Tan Rong and Xue Huai feel that it is not appropriate. They used a good deed. The reason for this, I wanted to say something at the time. Tan Rong started to threaten me with a posture of Sandlord, if you talk nonsense I will resign from the law. Nothing, let him go. Anyway, Pushun makes money. I have always relied on them for money. They don't feel distressed and it's not my turn to dictate." Jia Sheng sighed, "Before the poor road, I didn't dare to say anything. I was worried that I was a frog at the bottom of the well. I didn't know much about it. Hearing the sincere words of the Lord Yishan, I can finally be absolutely sure. It is natural to be close to Qingping Jianzong, so the alliance between our 2 parties is really a natural fit." If the good words stopped here, it would not be the old fairy Jia who immediately went to teach in a private college. Pandao can't speak, he wants to speak, he's also going straight back and forth. He doesn't know much about Pushun Yunkatang before. I only think that it is Yi Shanju, the pillar of pillars, who provoked it alone. All the heavy burdens I only know now. It turns out that there are many responsible people on Pushun's side, no shortage of heroes, nonsense, many offenses, and I hope that Lord Yishan will forgive him. There was silence in the chamber. It seems that when the old fairy Jia speaks, he has a unique aura. Yunyun had to clasp her fists and smiled and said, "Thanks to the prize." Zhongqiu turned a page and said with a smile, "On Yuguazong's side, the gift is 800 Guyu Qian." Qin Pingan couldn't help asking, "How much?" "Guyu Qian, 800 pieces." Zhongqiu said, "Besides, young master Jiangheng promised something orally at Yunku Fudi, but there is no paper contract. They will have Huanggeji and Yenshan within 500 years. All the income from the office is given to Qingping Jianzong. As a congratulatory gift from Jiang's blessed land, it has nothing to do with Yuguazong. According to young master Jiang, this is the Jiang's ancestral hall before his father went down the mountain for a tour. No one has any objections to this resolution." Xiaomo is a little bit ashamed of himself. The chief of the fallen mountain Zhou, who only heard his name but never met him, is really magnificent. The old real person Liang Shuang refers to Shenfeng Yuan Lingyan, Taihui Jianzong Lu Jinglong, and Jinjai a great sword fairy Su Hao. They all have a few grains of rain and money. In fact, this is the common sense for watching rituals on the mountain. Among them, Taishishan the immortal was really very polite and took out 2 private treasures as gifts, one for Taishishan and one for his personal congratulations. Cui Dongshan chuckled and said, "It's a pity that our Wei Haiyang is not on the mountain, otherwise Sect Master Lu can hardly be called invincible." Pei Qian didn't speak. She knew how Wei Haiyang got the nickname. Among the 4 people in Uwafudi scrolls, the one that Pei Qian is closest to, except for Zhu Lian, is Wei Xian, who proclaims that he has a very good drinker and then pours a cup. This was because Pei Qian spent a long time getting along with the old cook when he arrived at Luapa Mountain. I really want to say that the relationship at the beginning was that the little black charcoal girl was still the best with Wei Xian. Moreover, I left the lotus roots and traveled to Tongyi's house together. I also counted that Wei Xian took Pei Qian to go out and wandered the most times. I dare not say that he returned with a full load. After all, Wei Xian was also poor at that time and had little money in his pocket, but make sure that the little girl eats her belly round and hiccups all the way. So now I look at Wei Xian's direct disciple, the little girl Chai Wu, and Pei Qian have a different mentality. In fact, the Xinjia wine and water that Chai Wu is drinking now is all Pei Qian's own money. Then there is Qiu Du, because the old woman was a guest of ceremonies first, and then became an enshrined by the Zushitang. She sneaked a trip to the old dragon palace site before, but under the eyes of the new king of the East Sea, Zhu, trembling, walking on thin ice, took out a small part. The old dragon palace treasures, except for the 3 favorite objects at the bottom of the box, will be used by the old dragon palace teacher as a dowry for the future, and all the others will be taken out. Qiudu didn't even leave one for himself. After Cui Dongshan's previous help, he estimated 600 grains of rain money. At the same time, it can be seen that the wealth of the family and financial resources of a Dad Yulong palace in the past years. Qingtong also took the initiative to find Cui Dongshan before, along with a nearby object, mostly a single collection of books and some secret treasures. If you leave out a few treasures on the mountain, it is probably equivalent to 1/10 of a treasure in the old Jinyao building. Therefore, according to Cui Dongshan's statement at the moment of planting autumn, he directly reported a number. The congratulatory gift of fellow Taoists was 1,200 Guyu Qian. Cui Dongshan said suddenly, "Mr. Eugene over there, he claims to be willing to take out 50% of his family as a gift. This is because Zhong Kue previously helped to mediate. It is equivalent to helping Fat Gusu come to collect debts. Otherwise, Cui Dongshan and Xiao Mo will only resolutely deny that there has been such a thing, and the other will only say that they did not make it." Across the sea, Qin Pingan smiled and said, "You are the next sect master. This kind of next sect affairs ask me what to do. If you really want me to say something, 50% is too much, 30% or 4% is enough." Cui Dongshan said, "Understood." Finally, there are the 2 rich landlords Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui. They are not disappointing at all. They can be called extraordinary shots. One given is a large fairy named Tongyin. Although it is regarded as Liuzhou Lu, the common gift of the clan and the Xuanmi dynasty, the Tongyin fairy is not a high-cost and sky-high intercontinental fairy like Fengyuan, but the rank is no less than that of Luapa Mountain, so the route can be included. Tongyi's Hao is a land of mountains and rivers, and its carrying capacity is better than the dragon boat that was used as a viewing boat in the past. For Qingping Jianzong, this is equivalent to a good thing for someone to doze off and hand over a pillow. After all, Today's in the vast world, the ferry boats of high rank are too short of demand and money can't be bought. As long as there is this kind of ferry, you will have a cornucopia of wealth. Cui Dongshan glanced at Pei Qian and said cautiously, except for this Dongyin ferry, Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui all hope that the master sister can serve as the famous guest of the Lu family and the Xuanmi dynasty of Aizhou, and the master sister is willing to be the offering is better. As long as the elder sister nods, the two parties are willing to give 600 Guyuqian and 400 Guyuqian in one breath. If it is the offering, the amount of Guyuqian will be doubled, and they both promised just under the name. For the named guest qing or enshrinement, there will be no need for the master sister to participate in any family ancestral halls or the Xuanmi dynasty's capital meetings in the future. The master sisters will show up on the Aizhou or Xuanmi dynasty at least every 100 years. Qin Pingan was speechless. The Lu family is really wealthy to the point of heinous. Don't guess the Tongyin ferry is Liu's family property, and it has no relationship with Yu Panshui. Maybe even the 1,000 Guyu money that invited Pei Qian to serve as the honorable guest was Lu Jubao's pocket alone. So it is different to have a rich friend who is the richest in the world. Qin Pingan wanted to ask those two privately, can you still accept martial arts? To say that Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui, as extremely pragmatic businessmen of course, do not have money and no place to spend, they have a certain degree of selfishness. The relationship between the sword fairy Su Hao and Pei Qian is so good, which is a clear proof. Back in Jinjiazu, Zheng Qian rescued many mountain trainers and dynasty generals on the battlefield. This taciturn woman martial artist was young and punched and ruthless. Although she was not as great as xianxia, she didn't know. Why, all the natives of Jinjiazu have discovered a strange thing. It seems that Zheng Qian, who has the unshakable hatred with the wild monster race, has fought against the enemy on the battlefield from south to north. Ruthless, more brutal than xianxia and Yu Yufu, who are also pure martial artists. In many cases, Zheng Qian simply deliberately tortured and killed the monk. Or deliberately smashed half of the head of a demon cultivator, especially a few demon cultivators who were tortured by Zheng Qian, specially freed his hands. There was once a rumor that he had been to half of the Great Wall of Sword Qi to make swords. The young Jianxia was unfortunately found by Zheng Qian, and he was pulled up by Pei Qian. At that time, a monk of the Yuanying monster tribe who was a protector of Taoism was opened with the palm of his hand and carried a magic trick. Instead of retreating, she cut the opponent in half on the spot, and the female grandmaster who was already covered in blood just passed by. On the battlefield of Jinjiazu, from the genealogical monk to the army under the mountain, everyone has hatred and they all bear blood and there is no retreat, so everyone is avenging. However, Zheng Qian's help to avenge his revenge is undoubtedly the most enjoyable in the eyes of the Jinjiazu natives on the battlefield. But in fact, the reason why Pei Qian, a martial artist from a foreign country, made such a fist in Jinjiazu so fierce and almost abnormal, is purely a kind of silent venting of anger. It is you wild beasts that prevented my master from returning home. According to Cui Dongshan's humorous saying, every time Jinjiazu mentioned Mr., it would be a sentence, oh, it turned out to be the master of Master Zheng. Therefore, it is hard to say that the husband and the master sister go to other places together, but in that Jinjiazu, the master sister must be more popular. In short, when the Lu family of Aizhou did business in Jinjiazu in the future, Pei Qian made an exception to serve as the honor of a certain mountain for the first time, Kiching, which is a very powerful gold signboard. Pei Qian said, yes, it's okay to be an offering. But Guyu Qian, Qingping Jianzong and Luopashan are half divided. In fact, the sword fairy Su Hao had mentioned this to her before, but she did not directly agree or refuse, only to ask the master. Cui Dongshan was about to peck the rice, but Qin Pingan shook his head and said, you keep this fairy money for yourself. Pei Qianyan smiled and said, Master, I'm a martial artist, what do I keep so much fairy money? Qin Pingan smiled and said, Master has the final say. Pei Qian said, listen to the master. When the ferry was built earlier, Cui Dongshan once asked Pei Qian a question while his husband was away. When the elder sister was in Jinjiazu, didn't she plan to return to Luapa Mountain? Pei Qian was silent for a long time, just drinking. Cui Dongshan insisted on the master sister to give an answer, and then Pei Qian gave the true thoughts in his heart. As long as master does not return to Luapa Mountain will not be her home. What she meant was that if the master is gone, her home will be gone. It's just that Cui Dongshan has not dared to tell her husband so far. I'm afraid of being held hostage by the master sister, and even more afraid that my husband will be sad. Cui Dongshan patted his palms, there will be a second ceremony next, let's rest for half an hour. Because there is also a writing ceremony for the Qingping Jianzong Jinyu genealogy. Qin Pingan and Li Baoping walked out of the main hall, but did not go straight to the square outside the entrance of the Patriarch Hall. They sat on the steps outside the door. Cui Dongshan took Pei Qian to find the two rich men. Chao Qingqing, Xiao Mili, and of course the old Jia, are busy in the Ancestor Hall and need to rearrange their chairs. There will be a table with pens, inks, papers and inkstones. The earliest writer will write down Cui Dongshan, the first lord of Qingping Jianzong, his name, birthplace and pedigree, the first in the genealogy of King Pingfeng's Patriarch Hall. Bitch. Of course this person is Qin Pingan. Then it was the long life of the ancestor of the Shangzong Zanglu, to write the name on the genealogy for the next Zong Zanglu Tsuiwei. After this, it was Cui Wei who took the seat and was responsible for writing the names of all the genealogical monks included in the Qingping sword sect, Miyu Zhongqiu Chao Qingqing. After that was the apprenticeship ceremony. Cui Dongshan took Hu Chuling and Jiang as his disciples. Cui Wei, take his disciple back in an oblique manner. Miyu took Higu as a direct biography and Sui right to accept Qing Chaolu and so on. After they drank the apprentice tea, the disciples bowed their heads, even if they were official apprentices on the mountain. Among the second-generation disciples of the Shangshan Xiazong, as the direct disciples of the mountain lord Qin Pingan, there are Cui Dongshan, Pei Qian, Chao Sunny, Zhao Shuxia and Guizhujiu. The Tsinyuanji that Zhu brought up the mountain, the two disciples of Lu Baixiang Yuan Bao Yuan Lai. Wei Xian's disciple Chai Wu. The two disciples of Jia Sheng Zhao Dengao and Tian Jiuer. Then there are 6 sword fairy embryos including Bai Xian except King Sun Chun who is an anonymous disciple of Ning Yao. And the 3 generations of disciples, the eldest disciple with Pei Qian, the little mute of the Kalongxiang New Year shop, his real name is Zhou Junqian. And Jiang Chu Hu Chuling who will soon become Cui Dongshan's direct disciples, thank you a few of them. According to the seniority of the mountain, when you see Qin Pingan in the future, these few will be honored as ancestors. Qin Pingan smiled and asked, why happen to be here today? Li Baoping said, I traveled to the gate of Sui Mountain in Zhongtu, and I finished the draft early. When I went up the mountain, I had to discuss with the Department of Etiquette of the Shanjun Mansion to see if I could be allowed to build the monument. It turned out to be such a coincidence. I was still wondering how I was on the border of Suishan Mountain. I heard a sound of drums in the middle of the night. When I hurried to the foot of the mountain, it was just daybreak when Zhou Shanjun appeared in person. In addition to saying that there was no problem with the Tubei issue, he also told me the reason for the drum sound, saying that the young master left the solar term courtyard in Suishan last night. If I entered the Zhongyue realm earlier last night, he could help with the little master. Hello. I estimated the time, and it seemed that there was less than a stick of incense. If I was anxious, I called my brother. When I was involved, my brother and Zhou Shanjun made apologies and apologized. After that, my brother did not. I immediately let it go, and helped to figure out the specific time of the celebration on the little teacher's side, so I had to be patient and accompany my brother to build the monument. Qin Pingan smiled and said, confused, who is it that accompanies whom to rub the monument? Li Baoping laughed. Qin Pingan said, blame me for leaving too hastily. Li Baoping said, my brother said that he should not show up here temporarily, he is going to take a trip to the Western Buddhist country first. After he comes back, he may first go to Baidi City as a guest, and then come to the little uncle for a refreshing drink. Qin Pingan nodded. Just hope one thing, in that Baidi City the two sides just play chess, don't fight. After all, I really have to care about it, I can't escape the relationship. Looking at the slightly frowning Uncle Li, Li Baoping suddenly laughed and said, my brother said he will go to Baidi City in the future, and it has nothing to do with the little uncle, so don't think about it. Qin Pingan was silent for a moment, with his arms folded, and said softly, there will always be some people who will make us want to be that kind of person. Li Baoping said, little master has always been such a person. Qin Pingan took out the sword gourd and shook it, don't drink much. Li Baoping took off the sword gourd and gently touched the wine gourd of the little uncle, and each drank. Qin Pingan asked with a smile, if you want to travel to Tongyi's Hao, I can accompany you. Li Baoping blinked. My brother said before he returns, you can't disturb the practice of the younger teacher and uncle. When he said this, my brother looked serious and fierce. Qin Pingan held back a smile. Where can the fierce go? Li Baoping scowled and began to imitate the expression of his elder brother Li Shixing. Aquarius, you really have to listen to this matter once. Don't glance around, don't speak, right? Then you have to nod your head, okay. It's your default. Pei Qian and Cui Dongshan quickly walked into the gate and sat on the steps together. Cui Dongshan sat beside her husband, and Pei Qian sat beside Sister Aquarius. Li Baoping touched Pei Qian's head and said something to grow up. Well, the girl is so kind and she's worried about marrying. Pei Qian squinted and smiled, so don't marry someone. Chen Pingan asked, after the second ceremony, can I use a compromise method to bring Yu Guizhong in to participate in the blasphemy? Take it as a common test to decide whether the two sides form an alliance. But we really want to do this. Will Yu Qizhong feel that we are making progress? I'm actually not very good at dealing with this kind of interest exchanges between big sects. Dongshan, do you think it is appropriate? Cui Dongshan smiled and said, Sir, there is something you may have misjudged a little bit. Qin Pingan asked, how do you tell? Cui Dongshan said, in this Tongyi's Hao we have nothing to be arrogant. There are actually only two mountain forces that can speak for themselves. It is not our Qingping Jianzong who needs to look at people's faces to act, but the Yu Guizhong. If the other party thinks that we just didn't agree to the alliance right away, they feel that we are aggressive and deliberately put on airs or something, then they really think that Yu Guizhong looks at himself too highly and underestimates our Qingping Jianzong. I think this proposal by Mr. is actually very well measured. A few Zhang Fenggu who can participate in discussions in our Qingping Feng Patriarch Hall as an outsider, should be content. How can it be said to make things difficult for them? Obviously it is a kind of it gives them a big step forward. So, Mr. is still too good to talk. Qin Pingan smiled and said, this statement is very good. If you put it another way, Cui Yang is actually very useful. There is nothing wrong with it. I had already reminded the guests to wake up before, so everyone soon gathered again on Qingping Feng Square. Tao Ran came to me yes side, and there was the named worship from the Shangzong, the Taoist name Shizhu, the name is strange, yellow hat and blue shoes, holding a green bamboo stick, accompanied by the chief Rice. Both sides leaned against the cliffside railings. Gossip. Miyu straightened up and said with a smile, Tao Jianxian, what's the matter with me? I don't know what to order. Earlier, the hidden officer and Tao Ran came together to participate in the celebration. During the conversation on the mountain road, Miyu almost didn't kneel down for the powerful Tao Jianxian. With a stern look, I advise Master Hermit, don't take a bite of Tao Jianxian from now on, he doesn't like to listen. Before putting it away, I just asked him about the sword. Tao Jianxian, you really don't know the fate of being asked about the sword by our hidden officer. However, Miyu expressed a kind of respect for Tao Ran. In our next sect there are people who are so hard-hearted. Who are there? Are there? It seems not. Tao Ran asked, let me dare to ask, fellow Taoist Shizhu is also a sword repairman? Xiao Mo nodded with a smile. Tao Ran bit his scalp and said, there were some idiots before, even if fellow Taoist Shizhu has heard it, don't worry about it. Once in the shop on the Rin River, Tao Ran made a ruthless word with this fellow Taoist. Climb away. Tao Ran is not a fool, just look at the seat arrangement of the Patriarch Hall today, the chair of Taoist Shizhu, but it is right next to Pei Qian. Xiao Mo smiled kindly, shook his head and said, Tao Zhufeng has been worried, so I will call me Xiaoma from now on. Xiao Mo can't remember some of the so-called things Tao Zhufeng said, so why not care about it? Tao Ran was relieved and he did not rashly ask about the other side's realm, so he was easily taboo. What's more, the two sides didn't have much friendship. It really counted and only met for the second time. It was not related to the level of the realm. Xiao Mo seemed to see through Tao Ran's mind and smiled, I and Chief Mi are in a different state. Tao Ran nodded. Yuaning realm sword repair? It is estimated that it is not enough. This senior Shizhu is estimated to be a sword immortal in the Yupu realm. Miyu grinned and didn't explain anything. In fact, Tao Ran had already accepted his fate. If you are willing to call Tao Jianxian, if you don't feel the price drop, I don't care. I never thought that Xiao Mo changed his words first, calling himself Taoism, and then looking at the chief of Mi. Xiao Mo deserves to be from the Shangzong Luapa mountain, and he speaks more carefully. Elsewhere, Liang Shuang and Qing were standing together, and the old man asked curiously, my fellow Taoist Qing, why have you also become an offering here? Qing Tong explained with a smile, my name is Qing Tong and Qingping Jianzong has the word Qing and I agree with him. The old real man was speechless for a moment. It's really ridiculous. Not only did Lu Yuzhou see Pei Qian just now, she actually agreed to her father's invitation to serve as her own worship, and she was still happy now. Yu Panshui patted the young man on the shoulder. When do you have a wedding drink? Lu Yuzhou flushed and pretended to be stupid. What do you mean? Lu Jubao smiled and didn't say anything. If it can happen, of course it would be a great happy event. He and Lu Yu's mother had already talked about it in private. She looked forward to it and was sad and asked Lu Jubao herself, is the son a bit unworthy of that girl, but he really wants to marry in. Pei Qian is a limitless martial artist. In case of a quarrel, will his son have a blue nose and swollen face and dare not complain to his parents, and even worry about his wife's slap? Does it hurt? How dare Lu Jubao comment on this incident? I have to admit that his son wants to marry Pei Qian as his wife. This matter is too difficult. The silly son may not have noticed it yet. As Pei Qian's master, the young hidden official looked at his son like an anti-thief. Not only that, Qin Pingan also felt like he was looking for a place to put his sack on. Li Baoping pulled Pei Qian and found Jing Yugan, the eldest disciple of Uncle Lu Shirley. The three of them happened to be the three redisciples of Jun Qian, Qi Jingchun and Qin Pingan from the line of Wenxing. Jiangchu never thought that he could become Cui Dongshan's direct disciple. The big disciple of Kaishan, it is estimated that there are already candidates, but sect master Cui deliberately omitted to mention it. But Jiang Qun'er dared to hope to become a great apprentice of the lord of the sect. Jiang went and took a deep breath. Zhang Jiazhen just stood there, clasped his fists and shook a few times. The accountant, who looked at least 10 years older than Jiang Chu, smiled sincerely and was sincerely happy for his peers from the same country, but he didn't say anything polite as the icing on the cake. Jiang Chu hesitated to speak but stopped. On the Luapa mountain, Jiang Chu, who devoted himself to the practice of fulu, was once drawn by Zhu Lian to work on the civil construction work. In fact, Zhu Lian beat Jiang Chu. If you really have a good relationship with Zhang Jiazhen, you will be considered as a small-hearted person, and then I will help you find a preacher. In addition, the old cook also frankly met with Jiang Chu. Be careful, don't be the first mountain monk to be removed from the Luapa mountain. My so-called delisting is not necessarily on the Patriarch Hall's genealogy but here. The old cook took the wine jug and tapped his heart lightly. I would like to remind you in advance that this kind of thing is not easy to do. I advise you not to be smart and pretend to be polite with Zhang Jiazhen. Does it work? That would be stupid. You might as well think about it for yourself. We Luapashan, most people look at your Jiang's little thoughts. Isn't it the same as playing? It is as shallow as a small water beach after rain. Jiang Chu did not hold back, reached out his hand to grasp Zhang Jiazhen's arm and said, Jiazhen, don't get old too fast. Although Zhang Jiazhen felt strange, she nodded and smiled. Okay. I just feel that Jiang Chu has become different, like returning to his hometown. Both of them are just day laborers in the wine shop. Bai Xian, Chai Wu and Sun Chunwang waited for the millet grains. They are all friends on this small hill. It's about the same size now. After finishing the moving of the ancestor's chair, the little girl in black rushed out. Chai Wu asked the question she was most interested in. Guardian right, you are discussing matters in the Patriarch Hall, can you drink? If possible, she will practice more seriously. How could the wine over there be the kind of expensive Xinjiao fermented wine? Millet scratched his face. This question is a bit tricky and said tentatively, it's okay. The good mountain lord didn't say no, but he just hadn't seen anyone drink it before. Even if it was a good man mountain master and a martial arts leader, such a big official, just now they just drank on the outer steps. Bai Xian's arms crossed his chest. For this kind of question, directly ask the hidden officer. Chai Wu said, how busy Qin Shanzhu is, can he just see and disturb him? It is rare for King Sun Chun to speak. His lord hidden is busy and patience is still very good. Back then I left with Master Hermit from Luhua Island, and took a talisman boat to swim far away. In order to take care of them, these big kids, big and small things, the Master Hermit was busy alone and I didn't see him complaining. I'm very patient. It was later that Qing Chaolu began to share part of it. Later the relationship became familiar, except for Yu Qingzhang and He Xiangding, who had prejudices against the hermit. The white-eyed wolf, of course, was the nickname given by Bai Xian. Sun Chunwang felt they didn't wrong them either, not to mention their nicknames. Compared to his own dead fish eyes, King Sun Chun didn't think it was too ugly. Not far away stood a shy outsider who wanted to get close, Qiu Ji. Because I saw Qingping Peak all over, there were only people of the same age and they were still standing together, so Qiu Ji wanted to chat with them. After all, Qiu Ji was still a child. Before he was taken up the mountain, he was not a rich and noble family. He could only be regarded as a substantial gateway to the foot of the mountain, belonging to the scholarly family of the family heir to farming and studying in Tonggishao. After Bai Xian held his hands down, he circled him. Your name is Qiu Ji? I heard that you are from Yuguazhang Jiaifeng? Qiu Ji nodded. A little nervous. I heard Grandpa Zhang said in private that the children on the side of Luapa Mountain might come from the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In the vast world it is not the sword repair but the sword repair. Facing the Great Wall of Sword Qi except perhaps Beiju Luzhou, there will be an extremely complicated mentality. Although Qiuji was not very young during the short years of Jiao Yifeng's practice, he had gradually realized the weight of these words. Yu Guizong, Jiao Yifeng and Jian Xiu. Bai Xian asked, "Then have you heard of me?" Qiuji nodded and said, "It's called Bai Xian." The memory is deep, except that the other party is the same age as him, and not only this Bai Xian but also the others. There is something that Qiuji feels unclear. Especially this Bai Xian was the clearest. Qiuji is still unclear. That is a kind of almost arrogant self-confidence. There are two types of sword repairs in the world, the Great Wall of Sword Qi and beyond. I come from Jianqi Great Wall. In the streets and alleys of my hometown, swordsmen can be seen everywhere. I am young and have never been to Qingtu, but I will definitely go there in the future. Because about every 100 years, there will be a big battle waiting for us to fight, ascend to the top of the city, and then we can hand the sword with the entire wild world. Then Jian Xiu, who grew up in such a place, would still carry a kind of natural edge even if he reached Howran world. Qiuji asked curiously, "Bai Xian, can you ask, are you a direct disciple of Lord Hermit?" Bai Xian waved his hand, "I have a master in my hometown, not to mention that I have a nickname, Little Hermit, and it is not appropriate to go with the master of Hermit." Qiuji wondered, "So who is the little hidden official?" Bai Xian yawned, "Just a few years older than me, that fellow is not worth mentioning." Xiaomi Li said immediately, "The little hidden official Chen Li is in the Golden Core realm." Bai Xian said, "Yes, that's why I said it's not worth mentioning." Qiuji was amazed. "Awesome, the Golden Core realm is nothing. In the future I will come to Qingping Jianzong often as a guest." Bai Xian asked casually, "Qiuji, what realm are you in?" Qiuji hesitated but told the truth, Dragon Gate realm. Bai Xian was not surprised but pitying in his eyes. The little sword immortal of the cave mansion realm sighed, shook his head, patted Qiuji on the shoulder and comforted, "Then it is the same way as Chen Li to practice swordsmanship. Am not qualified enough, come here with diligence. I will return to Jiao Yifeng in the future, remember not to slacken in my practice. Give me a mailing address, every 3 and 5 points, Fei Jin will send a letter, I have to remind you a few words." Qiuji laughed and nodded gently. It is indeed the Qingping sword sect created by the hidden officer, and it is really not a big deal to be a sword repair in the Golden Core realm. But Qiuji thinks that is reasonable, and that is how it should be. Bai Xian remembered something, looked around, then stretched out his arm around Qiuji's shoulders, involuntarily pulled the ladder to go elsewhere, walked a long distance, deliberately turned his back to the millet. Bai Xian carefully took out a portable book from his arms, the collection of heroes, lowered his voice and said, "Qiuji, I met you right away and fell in love with you. Since today is the celebration of our next sect, it must be a lucky day. I have this booklet here. Come and sign it. Name, in the future we will be the kind of friends who cut chicken heads, burned yellow paper and made a knot of golden orchids. Oh, forget that I didn't bring pen and ink, it's okay, I have ink pad and handprints, the same is true." Bai Shou looked at the scene from a distance with a lot of emotion, committing evil. Wang Ji smiled and said, "In Yuguizang from Shenzhufeng to Jiaifeng, Qiuji would not have such a dialogue. This child is all relaxed at the moment." Zhang Fenggu smiled and said, "It's pretty good. The kid will not take the identity of the peak master of Jiao Yifeng too seriously. If Qiuji can have several peers here, he can become a future generation. Long-term friends, then Jiao Yifeng will make a profit on this trip." Wang Ji frowned slightly, "Would you like to remind Qiuji, don't just put fingerprints on it? There are so many weird skills on the mountain, no wonder Wang Ji is suspicious, and Wang Ji himself in the arena is also extremely heroic, but Qiuji, this child, is extremely important to Yu Guizong, so that the Lord Weiying went to Howran. Before the world, words like last words were actually left, and they were recorded in the Patriarch Hall. If he himself cannot return from the barren world, he will be enshrined by Zhang Fenggu and Wang Ji, the Patriarch Hall, and protect Qiuji at any cost. As for the position of Sect Master Yu Gui, I would rather hang it for 100 years or even longer, and let Qiuji grow slowly, and then fill the position of the next Sect Master." Zhang Fenggu thought for a moment, "We don't need to be so nervous, the spirit of Qingping Jianzong is still trustworthy." Taking 10,000 steps back, even if the Yu Guizong and Qingping Jianzong return to the future without success this time, it is still a fair and upright battle between gentlemen. Zhang Fenggu believed in the local sword repair of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and trusted a last-generation hermit who was willing to guard the city. Wang Ji laughed at himself, "It's me who treats a gentleman's belly with a villain's heart." Zhang Fenggu smiled and said, "You can't say that, don't think so." Zhang Fenggu hesitated for a moment and said tentatively, Wang Zhuanfeng, can you curse Jiang Shangzhen less in the future when discussing matters in the ancestor hall of Shenzhenfeng? Hearing this thoughtless reminder, Wang Ji didn't know how to answer for a while. As the ancestor of Yuguizong, the old master Xuanhuan, Zhang Fenggu knows more inside stories than Wang Ji. Many years ago, Wei Ying, the sword repairman who was still the peak master of Jiuifeng, had found the old Lord Xuanhuan and suggested that Yuguizong lead him, gather a group of Tongyi's house sword repairs, learn from Beiju Luzhou and rush to the sword. In the Great Wall of Qi for a long time, swallows held like mud, using one of the most stupid methods, and finally won a considerable amount of kendo luck for the entire Tongyi's house. And as the leader of Yuguizong, maybe there is a chance for an ascended realm. Jianxiu. At that time, Zhang Fenggu, who was Sun Yuan's junior brother, happened to be there, but Sun Yuan didn't agree and didn't give a statement. He only said that the matter would be discussed again. In fact, the so-called reconsideration meant that Sun Yuan would not mention it again. This makes Wei Ying extremely puzzling. There is no resentment, but loss is always inevitable. When Zhang Fenggu also went to inquire privately, senior brother Sun Yuan still did not give a reason. In the end, the facts proved that Sun Yuan and Wei Ying were both right and wrong at the same time. For the entire Tongyi's Hao, Wei Ying was wrong with Sun Yuan, but for Yu Guizong it was Wei Ying who was wrong with Sun Yuan. Because once Yu Guizong is too deeply involved with the Great Wall of Sword Qi and behaves too much, the encirclement of the monster army may at least have one more old throne monster such as Fei Fei or Move the Mountain. The old ancestor Yuan Shou even added a Qiyun, the savage Jiazi account, may be directly regardless of the cost. Even if the pace of the attack on Aquarius is delayed, the peaks of Yuguizong must be flattened as a kind of this is the end of the method of killing chickens and cursing monkeys, showing a gesture with Haoran, and daring to join the Great Wall of Jianxi. However, Zhang Fenggu confirmed that it was from that day that the senior brother Sun Yuan recognized Wei Ying and began to really plan for Wei Ying's future suzerain, paving the way for him in secret. In a sense, even to break the tradition, let Jiang Shangzhen, who was not the peak master of Jiuifeng, serve as the next master of Yuguizong, and let Wei Ying go to Beipingzu to succeed the master of the real world. It means that the two sides have switched positions. Sun Yuan clearly prepared for the worst, let Jiang Shangzhen guard the Zushan Shenzhufeng, and die if he died, and let Wei Ying and Zhenjingzong inherit the incense of Yuguizong. Go down. That is to say, from the very beginning, Sun Yuan first regarded Jiang Shangzhen as a roadblock for Wei Ying as the suzerain, and then placed it on Aquarius Island, similar to a feudal vassal, but when the battle was about to come, he turned his head, like again. Let His Royal Highness stay away from the capital, away from the place where the situation is precarious and there is no way out of right and wrong, and let the prince of the vassal enter the capital. Is Jiang Shangzhen really aware of the plan of the old master Sun Yuan? Must be very clear. No. Well. Are there any complaints? No complaints. Therefore, Zhang Fenggu looked at Jiang Shangzhen with an extremely complicated mentality. Because even Yu Qizong himself, most of the monks who have chairs in the Patriarch Hall, still haven't realized this. It seemed that Jiang Shangzhen didn't want anyone to realize the truth at all, so he was happy to continue to be scolded. Jiang Shangzhen has never been a soft-hearted master. As the Jiang family master who holds the blessed land of the Cloud Cave, his hands are covered with blood. Even if it is purely a monk, Jiang Shangzhen, who often goes out and travels, can be blamed if he talks about personal virtues. There are too many places. Probably this is a loss of personal morality, and there is no lack of righteousness, so Jiang Shangzhen can have a clear conscience? To have a clear conscience is not selfishness. I will not move at any outsider's abuse. It is not a clear conscience. The older this kind of person is, the thicker the skin will be. The matter is here and the dust is settled. No one knows what Sun Yuan thought back then. Perhaps the only confidant is Jiang Shangzhen. Because he used to practice in Shenzhufeng, Sun Yuan personally took him up the mountain, and later served as the genealogical sword repair of Zhenjingzong, so today the right of sway specially brought his disciple Qing Chaolu to Zhang Fenggu and Wang Ji to give a few words about the past. For Sui right side, this is already extremely rare. After saying goodbye, Qing Chaolu asked in a low voice, "Master, would you feel lost if you didn't become an official?" Sui smiled on the right and said, "Why do you think so?" Qing Chaolu scratched her head, "Just ask casually." Sui asked on the right, "The master is neither the master of discipline nor the chief worshipper. The swordsmanship is not high yet. Follow me to practice swords and boxing. No matter how you look at it, it seems that you are not very productive. Would you feel disappointed?" Qing Chaolu shook her head vigorously. "What's so disappointing about this?" Sui said on the right, "Qin Ping and Zhu Lian Lu Baixiang Wei Xian, and of course master's own unique boxing techniques. You have to learn with your heart. As for how much you can learn in the end, it's up to you to be determined and it's up to your fate. Qing Qiaolu wondered, can you learn the boxing technique of the hidden officer? Isn't it a steal? Isn't it a taboo? Sui smiled on the right and said, no. The second ceremony at Qingpingfeng Patriarch Hall was carried out step by step. Even after the celebration was over, the address of the Dadu excavation was actually chosen at Qingping Peak Patriarch Hall. This shows how much Qingping Jianzong attaches importance to this matter. In addition to Qingping Jianzong, Taipingshan, Dequan Dynasty, Pushen Yunkatang, there are Yuguizong, Zhang Fenggu, Wangji, Qiuji, Jiangheng. And Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui were invited, and Lu Yuzhou and Suhao belonged to the audience. On Qingping Jianzong's side there are Qin Pingan, Changming Wei Wenlong, Pei Qian, and Xiaomo Chui Dongshan Miyu Chui Wei Planting Autumn, Chao Sunny. The only strange thing is that He Gu, a direct disciple of Miyu, and Yu Shehui, a disciple of Zhang Lu Chui Wei, were also able to attend the meeting. Yu Panshui looked at Qin Pingan and his party on the opposite side and smiled, can I change my position? Yu Xiandushan and I are actually in the same group. Although there are many people on his side and the other side looks a little weak, in fact there are only a lot of house thieves in his own row. The young hidden official Ming and sect master Cui have a clear division of labor. One is responsible for deceiving the dog and the other is to kill the pig behind closed doors. Taipingshan and Pushen must be accomplices. Afterwards, the matter of Dadu excavation was discussed for about an hour. Mainly Cui Dongshan, Yi Yunyun and Li Shiling talked a lot, and it took more than half an hour for the new backbone of Dadu. It is still not a real conclusion, because the various forces present here will all disagree with which section of the river they will be responsible for in the future. This is also normal. Both Yu Guizong and Pu Shan must first go back to hold a meeting in their own patriarch hall. The Dequan dynasty will hold a huge court meeting and a small-scale meeting in the imperial study room. After King Pingfeng had at least finalized the major discussion that Tongyi's Hao will inevitably produce a new blasphemy, in the patriarch hall where Chao Qingqing closed the door, there was an extra old talent who made a madness. Shun Danshan's posture, stabilizing his figure, was much better than previously expected. He didn't sit directly on the ground. This old man who had finally gotten out of the gondolin of the Confucian temple turned around, folded his hands and looked at the portrait, twisting. He smiled and was proud, except for Jun Qian who is a little bit off-hearted. None of my disciples are unsightly. They all follow the husband in their appearance. After all, when I was young I went out to buy a drink. To be beaten only the ant of the fish market is too much. It is too much. The crabs that sold us both lacked arms and legs back then, and they lied to me that they were very fresh. The old man walked to the chair that led him and stretched out his hand to support the back of the chair. As a husband, he can shrink from the gondolin side and travel across continents. Can be so relaxed. Why, of course, is sitting in this chair. The student who went to school, this closed disciple, used all his merits, plus the merits of all the brothers, to carry their husbands and did one thing together. When the most sacred master returned to Gongdalin, a unicorn followed by his side. The master Jisheng made a special trip to pull up the Holy Spirit and Jingsheng Shiping, and had a drink with Lao Xiao, and finally said that he remembered to let your closed disciple go for a trip to Tianhuai. In the twilight, inside the house of Mi Xiefeng Chui Dongshan, a group of people sat around the furnace, slightly crowded. Qin Pingan millet grains. Pei Qian Li Baoping. Chao Sunny Jing Yugan. Only Chui Dongshan sits pitifully on a bench alone. Except for the millet grains, she does not belong to the family of Wenxing. The other 6 people, 2 generations, can almost be said to be the strictest sense of the same family. Qin Pingan and Chui Dongshan just took a short break from their busy schedule, and took a short break here. There are still a lot of tasks waiting for them. Li Baoping said something. Back then he met Gu Kan at the Fox Country in Qingfeng City. Qin Pingan smiled and nodded as he listened to Li Baoping's narration. In the past, Qin Pingan had never mentioned it even on Lu Xianyang's side. For example, a young man in Mudping Alley who was an apprentice kiln worker, every time he returned to Muping Alley from the long kiln, he would go out to play with a little slug, and buy something that Gukan was usually greedy and could not eat. Once let the little slug sit on the neck, the child opened his hands and yelled to fly. The straw shoe boy laughed and galloped in an alley. As a result, a pedestrian appeared at the corner by accident, in order to avoid the other person. The boy had to scoot his body in a hurry. As a result, the slug's head hit the wall and burst into laughter. The boy squatted down and put the child on the ground. Soon a red and swollen bag appeared on the child's forehead, and bleeding streaks appeared on the child's forehead. In that scene, the boy looked pale and colorless, his hands trembling, and he wanted to rub it with his palms a few times. As a result, when he just touched the wound, the child's crying became more heartbreaking, and the chaotic boy hugged him. "My child, I went to the roadside and found a few herbs, crushed them and chewed them up, carefully applied them to the child's wound, and then helped to wipe away the child's tears and snot. Repeatedly asked him if it hurts. The child worked hard. He sniffed his nose, squeezed a smile, hands on hips, and said that it hurts an egg. Then they went to Huda's bun shop, the boy paid for the bill, bought 2 meat buns, the little slug stood by, greedy. While subconsciously rubbing the swelling on his forehead, frowned, clenched his teeth without saying a word, just wiped off the 2 snots that were about to hang on his mouth indiscriminately, and the boy handed the 2 hot buns to the little slug. The child gave the boy a meat bun without saying a word, saying that he couldn't eat so much. The last one was walking down the street. The little slug shook his head and said that it was delicious and delicious. The best thing in the world was the meat buns from Aunt Huss family. The teenager holding the other bun, holding the child in one hand, waited for the slug to finish the bun, and then passed the bun in his hand. The slug really didn't eat enough, so he broke the bun in half and filled the bun. Most of them are on the teenager's side. This time when they see the teenager eat, the child eats. While eating, he vaguely said, "Chinpingen, when I get rich in the future, I will share half of all good things with you." Wait. When I grow up, I must have a lot of money. What does it matter if I have copper in my pocket? There are a lot of gold and silver at home, and I will save half of them for you. What I say is what counts. The straw shoe boy smiled and said okay. In fact, it didn't take it seriously. After all, the boy in Mud Bottle Alley and the little slug at that time, one only saw gold but never really touched silver, and the other might not have seen silver yet, but only touched copper coins. After many years of leaving their homes and then waiting to meet again, the opening remarks were a slap in the face in full view. The slug who was beaten was still very happy. But the person who beat him was very sad. So no one knows why Mr. Xianxia Island accountant who left Shujian Lake later, on the way home, after meeting that weird old gentleman, he would feel that if he had eaten 2 buns from Chishui City, he would have strength. An argument. Chen Pingan put away his thoughts, lowered his head, picked up the iron tongs and gently fiddled with the charcoal in the basin. Only in an instant, Qin Pingan and Cui Dongshan were almost at the same time, and they were the first to perceive the strangeness on the Patriarch Hall. The next moment, the old scholar came outside the house with a bright smile, stretched out his hand and pressed twice. Sit. All are good, all are good. Sword of Coming Chapter 961. The old scholar strode across the threshold and waved his hand to indicate that everyone did not need to change positions. The old scholar sat on the bench beside Cui Dongshan. Cui Dongshan's lips moved slightly, probably because he could not call out the patriarch. Qin Pingan took out a jar of wine and a set of wine glasses for the 12 flower gods, both of which were discussed in the Confucian temple last time. The old scholar took the wine glass. After filling the wine with the millet grains, he placed the wine jar on the bench beside him. The old scholar remembered something and took out a large stack of red envelopes from his sleeves. Each there are 2 snowflakes in the red envelope, not much money, but the Chinese New Year auspicious words on the red envelope, not long after the ink talent, was written by the old talent before leaving the Gongda Lin. Therefore, after the old scholar handed the red envelope to the millet grains, he smiled and reminded, "Millet grains, don't lose the red envelopes, they are worth a small amount of money, and they are mainly rare. If you are short of money in the future you can go. Xuanhu Academy or God Sect in Aquarius. Find a buyer who knows the goods and ask for less than 2 grains of rain. Don't sell it." Cui Dongshan gently shook the red envelope in his hand and rustled. It was 2 snowflake coins, not Xiaoshu Qian or Guyu Qian. As a result, the old Xiaotsai slapped him on his head. Millet grains held red envelopes in both hands, bowed their heads in a bow, and shouted in a clear voice, "Master Wenxing, Happy New Year. Thank Master Wenxing. I wish Master Wenxing a blessing in the East China Sea and a better life every day." The old scholar stroked his beard and smiled, Okay. Even Qin Pingan has a red envelope. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Sir, how old I am, I'll forget it." The old scholar shook his head and said, "On Mr. S. side, you are all children, accept it, take it quickly." Qin Pingan had to accept the red envelopes. The handwritings above were all written by the same person. However, the content of each red envelope was a little different, such as Cui Dongshan's red envelope, which reads New Year's luck, in Qin Ping's red envelope. It says, "Safety for the family." Since it can be confirmed that it is not the handwriting of Li Sheng and Jing Xing Shiping, it can only be the most holy master. The old scholar took a sip of his drink. Time is always the most unreasonable, just like a thief who has never lost a fight, and has never failed to steal something. Qin Pingan has grown up, and it's a year of no confusion. Xiao Baoping and Pei Qian have also grown up. So Wen Sheng's lineage, and now there are only Jun Qian's disciples, and Jing Yugan is still a serious child. So the old scholar turned his head to look at Jing Yugan and smiled and said, "Fuck again, take advantage of your younger brother and uncle is still young, very young, don't worry about growing up. You don't have to be too sensible when you are young and go out. Don't be afraid of things that dominate your mind. If you're arguing, you'll be noisy, you'll be able to fight, and you don't have to run away if you can't fight. You should report the name of the young master and ask the other party if you're afraid." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "If it doesn't work to report the name of the junior uncle, you should quickly report the name of the ancestor." The old talent laughed and said, "I have reported my name and be careful of being beaten twice." Jing Yuqian whispered, "Master said I have a bad temper, so I don't want to fight with people." In fact, before Lu 16 left Howren Tianxia, he and Jing Yugan did mention that if someone was really bullied, don't bother your ancestor, just ask your little uncle. The old scholar complained, "Nonsense, I saw Jun Qian when I turned back and I had to say a few words about him. Why did you have a bad temper? Treat others, be polite, well knowledgeable." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Senior brother Jun Qian is right. The disciples of our Wenxing family's personal transmission and retransmission, which one has a better temper? Well, maybe Aquarius and Sunny are a little better." Li Baoping squinted and smiled, so. Chao Yingqing smiled and said nothing. The old scholar raised his glass and took a sip. "That's right and right." Cui Dongshan grinned and dared to talk back to the old scholar in person and tear down the stage, and the old scholar still felt that there was nothing, really only his husband. The old scholar asked, "Pingan, are you sure to re-enter the 5 realms in the near future?" Qin Pingan nodded and said, "I'm sure." The old scholar was relieved and said, "Then I can approve the issuance of a Shanshui Mansion newsletter, which is to help you clarify. After the Battle of Jiantua Yueshan, there were a lot of falls and it took many years of retreat. Today the Zhongtu Confucian Temple's restrictions on the Zongmen Mansion report are the strictest in thousands of years. In addition to the decision made in the last Confucian Temple discussion, it is not allowed to report the progress of the Wild War without authorization, and even the war itself is not allowed. Any Shantao immortal mansion makes unreasonable remarks, and the news about any great monk on the top of the mountain should not be mentioned casually. The few exceptions are the criminal officer house's killing of Nan Guangzhou and the Shanhaizong. Privately told Howren the world, the sword immortals from the Great Wall of Jianqi jointly asked the sword barbarians, and Qin Pingan's sword opened Toyue Mountain and the latest engraved city head alone. This is because the Shanhaizong violated the rules and acted arbitrarily. If it were not for Wenxing himself afterwards helping to intercede, plus the young hidden official who is famous in the world, and the closed disciple of the old scholar, so in this matter, since Wenxing is willing to open the internet, the Confucian Temple has used a major event to make it smaller. Shanhaizong's symbolic punishment measures, fined Shanhaizong a sum of money from the gods, and all the income from the debao was turned over to the Confucian Temple, as well as a negligent recording. Otherwise, the writer of Shanhaizong's debao should have been in the Confucian Temple's merit forest. Studying sages' books hard. I heard that my husband was engraving in the city head earlier, and I felt it was out of the picture. Cui Dongshan tutade, "When this mansion is reported to the world, I heard that my husband is now in the Yuaning state, and I immediately thought it was okay." It is not difficult to understand why the veteran talent would make such an extra effort, in order to be able to reduce criticism. Since he is the last hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi, why not go to the barren world? Been there. But there will definitely be new questions next. Now that you can engrave on the top of the city, why not go to the wild world again? So this mansion newspaper is just an explanation. Cui Dongshan said, "In the debao, remember to mention that our Qingping sword sex Mi chief has already broken the border." The old scholar was puzzled. Mi Jianxian finally broke the border? Cui Dongshan said with no good air, "I just broke the border." The old scholar slapped his knee and laughed loudly, "This is good. A swordsmanship sect, there is a fairyland sword repair as a golden sign, there is no more worry about the tree to attract the wind, it is the only reason for others to worry about it. What's more, this great sword immortal is still Miyu, the shadow of the famous tree of man, and the nickname of Mi Lianyao that Miyu won in the 2 realms of the earth and immortals is still very important in the Howren world." The old Xiaotsai said, "Just now, as the initiator of Han Fuzi, I just made a trivial suggestion. The Confucian Temple urgently convened a small-scale mountain meeting in Jianghu including Shushan Mountain and Jiui Mountain. The 5 sacred monarchs are all here, and there are dozens of great country and mountain monarchs together. Of course, they used a method similar to Lu Kaishan and Yu Fati to visit Shindu Mountain today. The chat was very lively, especially when traveling around in Huai. A few Lien, come and go back with happiness. Look at their appearance, it seems that there is still a little bit of meaning. The Saint of Right still rarely show up. Yaxing went to the wild world and was responsible for the specific affairs of the Abbot Confucian Temple in the wild world. Today the Central Tu Confucian Temple is really in charge of Wensheng. The 3 leaders and deputy leaders of the Confucian Temple are now in the Confucian Temple, and there is only one deputy leader. This Han Fuzi is regarded as Wensheng's helper. Therefore the old scholar was ridiculed as a housekeeper by an old master surnamed Li. These days old scholars are at the Confucian Temple, and being busy is truly busy, spinning day and night. This time the Confucian Temple called the mountain gods to discuss matters, because the water gods all have the darts. You mountain gods can't watch from the wall. It doesn't sound good to spread them out. They are more or less doing practical things. People want to face the tree and want bark. Somehow they block the world. You can speak for a long time, so you don't need to slander you, the mountain gods, who will just stand by and enjoy the blessing. It's just that all the high-ranking mountain gods of all countries except the 5 mountains of the Middle Earth have clearly sensed that the old scholar seems to be deliberately targeting Hualien, even the best-tempered Yanzishan female mountain god, the named Bitter Vegetable. Zhu Yuxin was very eye-catching. She slapped the handle of the chair vigorously, and directly refuted Wensheng. Zhu Yuxin also threatened to stay in this Confucian Temple and talk about the facts, not to say a few innuendo strange things. Wensheng, you are so yin and yang. She will leave on the spot, and please don't worry about Yanzishan. Yanzishan will not choose what to do. The Confucian Temple will give you a list afterwards, where the duties are, and it is incumbent. She and Yanzishan will definitely do them one by one, but today she will never continue to be angry with the Confucian Temple. It is rare for Zhu Yuxin to speak so sternly. Suishan had to stand up and plan to exit first. The old scholar hurriedly stood behind Zhou Yu and pressed Suishan Shanjin's shoulders with both hands. But glanced at the god named Tianjin Mount Guishan, who had to fall back into the chair as soon as he lifted his butt. Qin Pingan said softly, "Actually, the reason why I stayed behind in those mountains, I guess that I had been indirectly instructed by the Holy Master in advance, and deliberately prevented me from climbing, which had little to do with the 4 mountain monarchs." The old scholar said with a guilty expression, "Ah? There is such a tortuous hidden feeling? That is because the husband misunderstood a few of them. It's okay, the husband has no other skills, but the least afraid of misunderstandings. See you next time. Open the skylight to speak brightly, and when it is opened, if they are really angry, Mr. Big Deal will take the initiative to come to the door to apologize." In fact, after the Confucian Temple mountain god meeting was over in Gongda Lin, the old scholar waited for a few visits. As expected, the 5 gods came together. Zhu Yuxin first apologized, and the old scholar thanked her instead. After all, the female mountain monarch's phrase, "Don't pick your sons, do them one by one," is the result that the old scholar or the Confucian Temple wanted. Zhu Yuxin took the lead in expressing his attitude, and the other mountain gods knew it. As for the noisy during the proceedings, such as a few dishes of wine and dishes for people to drink, to be honest, those mountain monarchs of the great dynasty, maybe they want to replace the gods of the 5 mountains, and Wensheng himself sneered a few words. Only talking about the 3 religions debate before the emergence of old scholars, they were almost always the Buddhas of Western Buddhism. Those who are not only proficient in the theory of classics and laws and the masters of Sanzang, who are extremely familiar with the other 2 teaching questions, have overwhelmed the Confucian Middle-earth Confucian Temple and the Taoist Baiyujing. Even if the Confucian Temple and Baiyujing had occasional victories, they had never connected, especially Confucianism, which has always lost. There are so many, so the old talents turned out to be born and won 2 consecutive debates. Many of the 2 groups of high-ranking scholars who are known as Buddhism and Taoism directly transferred to the Confucian school. They were once regarded as one kind of unprecedented feat. Now the old master Li, who is temporarily working at the Confucian Temple, once said a popular and fair word. "Old scholars don't talk strange things with your hippie smiles. Are you serious about quarreling with you?" The old scholar was probably worried that the closed disciple would think too much, whether he was causing trouble for himself, and explained with a smile, "Zhou Yu is actually like Ming Jing in his heart, and he is congenial with me. It's simply a reunion after being separated for many years." Brothers, he couldn't turn my face with anyone. The rest of Hualien and the others had a good impression of you. As for the fellow Tianjin Taoist from Guishan, he used to be in the same line as Wenxing. It's difficult to turn over the old accounts. Tianjin Taoists still feel that face is up and they are a bit unable to come to Taiwan. This time you visit Guishan. Once he did get the secret advice from the Confucian temple, he didn't dare to show up. I can't explain it to you, but I can only ask the temple to go to the foot of the mountain, bite the bullet and swear with you, and see that you are very polite, neither making troubles nor cursing others. In fact, in his heart now he is also comfortable with you. Too many. My husband deliberately asked a friend to preach a few words for Guishan, saying that Guishan is such a big shelf, it is worthy of the spine of Guishan, and he dares not to treat guests, even if people don't meet, he just let him hidden official headed back to the mansion. Therefore, in the Confucian temple, Guishan has a lot of face, and whenever young people mention Guishan in their leisure time, they must give a thumbs up, and sincerely admire our fellow Tianjin Taoist. Now that he has gained face. The steps are also there. After this disagreement is over, on the Gongdalan side, the Tianjin Taoist asked me to talk, saying that he welcomes the hermit to go to Guishan as a guest. Anyway, the drinks on the Guishan side are very good, sir. I agreed to help you first. As for whether to go to Guishan in the future, it's a very random thing. Qin Pingan couldn't help smiling and said, it's really embarrassing for Mr. Sheeping and Old Master Li to be a microphone for the husband. Chui Dongshan whispered, it turns out to be here to show your contacts secretly. Li Baoping gave the big white goose a thumbs up and exclaimed, Brother Xiu's brain is still tough. Chui Dongshan smiled awkwardly, what is it? The millet grain scratched his face and the big white goose was doing what I said. Qin Pingan took out a small wooden box from his sleeve, handed it to Chao Sunny and said with a smile, there is a very good ancient sword pill in it, named Xuanhuan. You can try to see if it can be refined. Think of it as a congratulatory gift from your husband. The carved patterns on the wooden box are exquisite and exquisite. There are many auspicious elephants such as priests crossing dragons, female fairies riding phoenixes, and ancient real people riding turtles. Chao Sunny hesitated but stood up, took the wooden box with both hands and thanked her husband properly. Pei Qian rolled his eyes and the one with the most rules was Chao Mumuto. Qin Pingan looked at his husband and then said to Chao Qingqing, the gentleman of that year also retrieved a sword pill with a very high rank from Suishan. It's a pity that my aptitude is average and I have never been able to. The true refining of my xuanhuan into a life thing can only be regarded as a kind of middle refining. The old scholar smiled while stroking his beard. What is this called? Qin Pingan went on to introduce. This sword pill was once the treasure of the townhouse in Xiang Mansion. It was originally the incumbent head of the Dafu Academy. It was presented to Wu Yi, the eldest daughter of the Dafu Academy, as a gift for her to enter the middle 5 realms. Wu Yi is also the founder of Xiang Mansion in Huangtinghua. For so many years Wu Yi has never opened all the bands on this sword box. It is estimated that she was planning to hit a certain sword fairy embryo as a disciple receiving ceremony. Send out. This is what I missed. It's a veritable leak, so Jianhuan must be sent out early so as not to dare to see Wu Yi afterwards. If she regrets it, she really wants to get it back. It can be said that it has been given away, and it is said that this rare sword pill named Xuanhuan can be paid at a discount. As for the thing, it will not be returned. After all, it is a good thing that you will not have if you miss it. It's sunny, it's better to open it. When the previous husband just succeeded, there was a series of purple and gold words appearing, and the meaning of the content was great. The words are like melting snow. Such visions are quite rare. According to Wu Yi, Jianru has a great background. It comes from the ancient times of Xie and Zhongtu, and it was carefully crafted by a real person of Taoism. It was originally a gift. As for how the treasure of Jinshan given to the mountain of the Prince of Xie will be scattered outside the mountain, and how it will be obtained by Qing Shanchang, it is estimated that it is a foolish account. Chao Qingqing nodded and said, students have seen in the book that the ancient Xie master was in charge of the casting and smelting of hardware, and also governed the genus of feathers and birds in the world, so the main responsibility is somewhat similar to the ministry of work of the later generations of the xianxia court. Qin Pingan smiled and nodded. Chao Sunny's remarks were almost exactly the same as he was on Wu Yi's back then. Mr. Students, they all read miscellaneous books and like to read miscellaneous books. Once Chao Qingqing takes over the position of Supreme Master in the future, if he is not a sword repairman, there is no doubt whether he can serve the public. From Luapa Mountain to Shindu Mountain, in this respect he is not particularly concerned about realm, identity, etc., but Chao as the second lord of Qingping sword sect, Qingqing is not a sword repairer. It is a pity after all, especially Chao Qingqing is a very thoughtful young man, and it is estimated that he will take the initiative to drink at that time. From the time that Qin Pingan insisted on bringing him back to Luapa Mountain from Dumb Lake, he not only included it in the mountain and water spectrum of Jiaifeng Zushitang, but also directly put it in place in one step. Enshrine the mountain. From that moment on, everyone knew it. The young mountain owner respects everyone's wishes and can really discuss everything. But as long as it is regarded by Qin Pingan as a major event in the true sense of Luapashan, there is no room for discussion, disputes, or slurs. After Chao Sunny opened the sword case, the room was full of sword energy, but Qin Pingan was about to stop, but immediately stopped, because the originally dead sword pill suddenly turned into a pocket-flying sword. Then he vacated the air to draw an arc and stab Chao Sunny's box-holding hand in an instant. Even though Chao Sunny was a golden core monk, he still could not escape this sudden question sword, and finally a grain condensed at the tip of the sword. The blood drops then disappeared. The sword pill is like a thirsty person drinking a sweet spring, hovering in the air. The tip of the sword trembles slightly, buzzing like a child leaping for joy. This is a kind of active recognition of the Lord, similar to psychic things on the mountain, and it is also a kind of opportunity for the immortal family that can be met and cannot be sought. To put it simply, it means that Chao Qingqing did not do anything, and had already refined this mud pill on the spot. As for when the exercise will be successful, Chao Qingqing is nothing more than time-consuming water-milling efforts. After that, a mud pill flying sword haunted the branch like a bird, spinning around its owner, Chao Qingqing. Then everyone looked at Qin Pingan. Even millet grains are no exception. Is it a good person who is really average aptitude? Cui Dongshan deliberately hiccups, helping Mr. to break the embarrassing atmosphere. The old scholar couldn't help but laugh, lifted the wine glass and smiled, "Drink and drink." After drinking the wine, Qin Pingan looked calm and smiled and said, "Sonny, I am not very familiar with the mountain monarch of Jushu Mountain, Hualien, but now there is a monarch who is known as the Blue Bull Taoist priest. I revisited the old place. I met the old man for the first time on the night ship. It was very close. It happened that this old man happened to be one of the 3 resident old people of Xia in ancient times. One of them is Niaoju Mountain. Next time you visit the divine continent of Middle-earth, you can go to the elders to humbly ask about the true origin of this sword pill." Chao Qingqing smiled and nodded. "Okay, the students must take a trip to Jushu Mountain and Niaoju Mountain." Qin Pingan suddenly asked, "Sir, the one who slashed the dragon?" The old Xiaotsai smiled and said, "Although this senior on the mountain cannot be regarded as a pure sword repair in the 14th realm in the narrow sense, don't underestimate this dragon slayer." Cui Dongshan curled his lips. "Of course it's amazing, I have dragon slaying skills, please watch Jingguang. Besides, this guy is still Jing Zhezhong's master." People like Jing Zhuzhong don't mind deceiving their masters and destroying their ancestors, but the problem is that if outsiders dare not deal with his master, then the Taishu Mountain, which is like the closed mountain, is the best example. The old scholar nodded. "It is indeed very powerful. Later generations of Qi training can only speculate about this person's swordsmanship through some oral deeds. In fact, Qin Kinglius' battle of slashing the dragon has deceived a certain part, and it is the most. The key truth about 3,000 years ago, the appearance of Qin Qinglu was originally a solitary case. It is not only a genus of the dragon, but also not very accurate for the entire world. It should be said that it is about the entire human world, and all the water, both descendants and Narcissus, are an invisible suppression of the avenue. Back then, Qin Qinglu used his sword alone to kill the dragons. When he met his Dragon Palace and Water Palace masters, let you sit in Zio Xiandi facing this person, it was still the first to fall. Circumstances, there is no way, there are always some people who have something to say, it seems totally unreasonable. In addition, according to the secret files of the Confucian Temple, yes, you have heard about this, don't let it out, otherwise it's a big deal. In addition to the saber, Qin Qinglu also possesses 2 natal flying swords. Just listen to the name, you will know the power. One is called xuanhuan, and the other is called Fire Spirit. In this way, by the way, all the Qi practitioners who practice water law, especially those who major in water law, will be brought along. As long as you encounter Qin Qinglu, you can imagine the fate of Jian Jian. It's okay to tell a little more story. The Haoran monk who previously prevented Xianxia from returning to the wild through the ruins is Lu Qi, who returned from the Qingming world to the Haoran. In fact, the Confucian Temple has a somewhat targeted layout for the wild monsters. Yes, if it wasn't for Fei Fei to escape fast enough, Qin Qinglu was already on her way to block the road at the time. Once Qin Qinglu found her whereabouts, Fei's fate would not be as good as to stop. Qin Pingan hesitated to speak but stopped. I wanted to ask why Qin Qinglu wanted to cut the dragon, the cause of the matter, and the original intention. The old scholar hesitated for a moment, raised his head and drank a glass of wine, used a very subtle statement, seemingly digressing, and answered the wrong question. This is also one of the reasons why Zhou Zi is alone. Worry about the sky. Can you understand what Mr. said that? Sword cultivation has its own reasons. There is great freedom without restraint. Then a pure sword repairer has passed the sword smoothly after the common people in the world. Qin Pingan smiled and nodded. The old scholar smiled gratifiedly. The grievances are clear to the man, but you don't need to be too constrained because of this. If you go to the other extreme, it will be bad. A person with many people in his heart tends to feel soft-hearted and look at the world too softly. Swordsmanship in the world, tracing back to its origin, is actually just a few basic contexts. The old scholar followed the topic and said, this is similar to the sound but 5, gong shang jiao huiyu, but the changes of the 5 tones are endless and invincible. The same is true for swordsmanship. Having said that, the old scholar turned his head and looked at Cui Dongshan. Cui Dongshan looked blank and shook the wine jar. Well, isn't there still wine? The old scholar stretched out his hand and twisted the ears of the boy in white. I like to pretend to be stupid, it's lawless. Cui Dongshan tilted his neck, screaming, it hurts, what's the matter, can you give me a correct sentence? The old Xiaotsai said, I was eaten by your husband when I was under the water well and was eaten by you? Cui Dongshan tilted his head with an expression of indescribable expression on his face. He sniffed his nose, raised a sleeve and wiped his face. He was extremely aggrieved. Qin Pingan was at a loss at first, but after hearing what his husband said, he immediately understood. Maybe the 3 strands of sword chi that hovered in one's chi mansion at the beginning were the 3 veins in a certain sense. The ancient kendo could at least be regarded as an important side branch of the 3 main veins. As a result, 2 rays of sword energy were rewarded to Cui Dongshan, who was hiding under the well and refused to rise. The husband and the students really have a deep and righteous relationship from the beginning. Qin Pingan smiled and said, Sir, let Dongshan arrange the ownership of the 2 rays of sword chi, and it can be used as a gift to Qingping Jianzong. The old scholar released his hand and nodded. It's just that he is so angry that he gets a good deal and he sells well. I always feel that everyone is a fool. Cui Dongshan rubbed his ears angrily. I have a long-term use and I want act for personal gain. The old scholar bends his fingers, which means that a chestnut slams on Cui Dongshan's head, and he teaches in a deep voice. A person who has ample knowledge will bring himself a huge trap, a sense of superiority in calculation and intelligence, that kind of habit. Sex is condescending to look at everyone's eyes and sooner or later there will be problems, big problems. Cui Dongshan shook his body, began to sneer and screamed, Why do you just teach me a person? Why am I alone? What about Aquarius? What about the master sister? What about Chao Sunny? Qin Pingan coughed. Cui Dongshan immediately sat upright and said sternly, Master Patriarch has taught me that I will write down every word on the paper when I look back. Xiaomi Li turned his head and glanced at the desk and asked softly, Sect Master Cui, do you want to help with paper and pen? Even the millet grains closest to me started to turn his elbows out. Cui Dongshan was dull and speechless at first, and then started howling again. The millet grains quickly handed over a handful of melon seeds, and Cui Dongshan was smiling. Qin Pingan didn't care about this guy, changed the subject and smiled. We met Zhao Yao in the capital city of Dali, and our servant lady set a thought and plans to reassemble the fairy sword. The 4 Tai Bai, which are grouped together into one, should be thinking about seeing that Mr. Bai again in the future, so that he can return to the original owner. The old scholar nodded and said, I'm very interested. The idea is good but it's too difficult to do, it's too difficult. Cui Dongshan said angrily, Shi Lang Zhao really ate the guts of the bear heart and the leopard. Didn't he know that his husband occupies one of the 4 fairy swords? When I meet in the future I will call him Brother Zhao. One of the 4 fairy swords, Tai Bai, except for the scabbard, the sword body was divided into 4, and each recognized its owner, namely Qin Pingyan, Zhao Yu, Fei Ran and Lu Kai. And because Zhao Yu had studied with a scholar for many years on that lonely island overseas, in a sense he was actually half a student for nothing. Wanting to gather a fairy sword, Tai Bai, again means that Zhao Yu must at least ask the other 3 people to ask the sword, and that all 3 questions must be successful. So there was a conversation about this fairy sword in Dali capital city. Zhao Yu took the lead to speak but just called him by name and called Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan immediately reminded, "It's not the truth, you have to call the little uncle." Then it was cold. After all, the two parties were discussing business matters and Qin Pingan smiled and said, "If one Jian has beaten Junior Master, you can take my Yao sword." Only Qin Pingan added, "Of course you can ask me for a punch." Zhao Yu is a thief, so he smiled and asked, "How about studying?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Learning? You are still far behind." Zhao Yu smiled and did not speak, as if 4 words were written on his face, disapproving. Qin Pingan said, "Mr. Qi said that the truth is in the book, but the man is outside the book." Zhao Yu thought for a while and nodded, "In this way I am really far from the little uncle." Li Baoping asked in doubt, "Is Zhao Yu Jianxiu?" Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "It's not a sword repair, at least not for the time being. Maybe he wants to follow the same path of practice as Mr. Bai." Li Baoping said, "Zhao Yu is more confessing to death and he is still very smart. Because I am a fellow countryman but also a classmate, so I know the roots and know the bottom. But for the school Mingtong back then, perhaps for the little girl in red who was in turmoil every day, now I always think of that she must be the last to step onto the school and the first peer to leave the school, or there will be more or less psychological shadows. The key is that this little girl walks alone every day. On the way to and from school, with a small school bag on her shoulders, she will bounce around and drink. Sometimes someone asked, she said she was practicing martial arts and learning boxing. Li Huai doesn't have to say anything. Even Zhao Yu, who was also born in Fulu Street, just went to the school when he was a child because he accidentally bullied a little girl with croissants. He was chased by Li Baoping with a branch and hit the door all the way home. As a result, Zhao parents asked her why she did it. The little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket replied, saying that it doesn't work to reason with him. If she doesn't admit her mistake, she is convinced that she can't deceive me. They were all neighbors in the neighborhood, and it was a fight between children. Zhao's parents couldn't say anything. In private they didn't dare to let Zhao Yu fight back by himself. She really couldn't beat the little girl who liked to cross the wall when she was a child. Then the next day Zhao Yu went home from get out of class. The child was pitiful, with footprints all over his body. It turned out that although Zhao Yu had deliberately bent around on the way from school and carefully selected a route home, he was still waiting for the rabbit by the little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket. "I happened to be caught upright, I just jumped up and kicked. I like to file a complaint, don't you? I want to do it, I will do it." But in fact, in order to ensure that she only moved her feet and not her hands, the little girl bumped into the wall several times and finally got her feet. She still insisted on accompanying Zhao Yao to go home, but Zhao Yao just went out the next day. I found that Li Baoping was squatting outside and blocking the door. The child was afraid and wronged and suddenly felt sad. He squatted on the ground holding his head, howling and crying. The limping girl walked to him and asked him. Recognizing whether he was wrong, Zhao Yu, with his nose and tears all over his face, was still reluctant to admit his mistake, but suddenly began to roll all over the floor. "If you don't have a chance, if you can't fight, you will move to the rescue." The little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket turned around and walked out more than a dozen steps with her shoulders high and low, and then suddenly stopped. She turned her head and looked at the same age who had stopped crying while sitting on the ground. She motioned her with her eyes and waited. When we arrived near the school, the two of us competed again. Even if Zhao Yu are like this, Lin Shui and Dong Shuijing are even more of a group of people. If they think too much, I'm afraid they will have a handful of bitter tears. So in the old school in the small town, the husband often taught there. The little girl in the cotton-padded jacket first touched the palm of her hand, and then was punished to stand at the back of the school or outside the school's window, sulking. After drinking almost half a pot of wine, the old scholar was already flushed and stood up with a smile. "I have to get it back. There is still a lot of business waiting." It is rare for Cui Dongshan to have nothing to say about it. It is not an old scholar who is hypocritical. Busy is really busy, and it is not a joke to shoulder the affairs of the world. Of course, it is not possible to take a leisurely moment, but for some Confucian temple decisions, it may only be a moment of difference between speed and slowness. The final result presented in the wild world is the difference between clouds and mud. Everyone in the house stood up and followed the old Xiaotsai to the outside. The old Xiaotsai wanted to cross the threshold, so he shrank the mountains and rivers and returned to the Gongda forest. He just walked outside the gate of the house and walked again. He walked to a cliffside pavilion on Mishue Peak. Only then did the old Xiaotsai stop. He just raised his head and glanced at the plaque. The old man stopped picking up the steps and walked up into the Nayun pavilion with a wide view and looked at Qin Pingan. A few of them smiled and said, "Don't send it away, let's all return. Old people get old year after year, but it is difficult for young people to get younger again. The old scholar looked at them, proud, but also inevitably a bit sad. They wanted their younger generations to grow up with the truth in the book, but did not want the children to grow up early. It was just this extremely contradictory thought. Probably only when you become a father and a teacher can you truly appreciate it. The old man forced himself to put all his words in his stomach and just smiled. If you have the opportunity in the future, you will go to the Gongda Lin of the Confucian Temple together. If you have any books you want to read, it is not a problem to make a list of books in advance. Qin Pingan took the lead in saying goodbye. The old scholar nodded with a smile, and returned to the Confucian Temple one step across the continent. The sky is bright and the moon is bright and the world is in a hurry. Sword of Coming Chapter 962. In the bright moon night, the whole land was full of moonlight like water, and the group left Nanting. Pei Qian took Li Baoping back to his residence. They reunited after a long time, and there were so many things to talk about. After Qin Pingan and Cui Dongshan confirmed that there is no hidden danger for Chao Qingqing, Cui Dongshan suggested that Chao Qingqing should not rush to formally practice his sword, and wait until the Golden Core realm is stabilized before going to Jingxing Peak. Of course there is no objection. Chao Qingqing took Zheng Yuqian and left together, and the two sides lived very close. Walking on the quiet mountain road in the dead of night, Zheng Yugan asked tentatively, "Brother Chao, can you tell me a little bit of concern? The main thing is that the student of the little uncle is gentle and elegant. At first glance he is very capable of reading." That's right, Brother Chao is the flower explorer of the Dali dynasty. Every time Master mentions this matter, he is also quite happy. Zheng Yugan felt that Sect Master Cui was a strange person. As for senior sister Pei, Zheng Yugan was also afraid. How could he not be afraid? Looking at the Shanshui Dibao on the transcontinental ferry, there were more than 2 diaries mentioning Zheng Qian, about the female great master on the Jinjiaza battlefield, and Zheng Yugan always had to be frightened. It's a figure far away. Anyway, it has nothing to do with me. It turned out to be good. She turned out to be the disciple of the little uncle's pioneer, and suddenly became her own sister Pei. Now every time she talks to sister Pei she doesn't stammer. Zheng Yugan has already made him feel very heroic. Chao Yingqing smiled and said, "Is it because of my background that I always feel a little awkward when I met my husband and us seniors and sisters?" Zheng Yegan nodded vigorously, "Yes, worry? I didn't think it was anything special because a certain friend always likes to use this to talk about things. I don't think about it anymore, but I have to think about it. Alas, the more I think about it, the more angry I will become. It's really boring." Chao Yingqing smiled and said, "Then you will have to thank Tan Yingzhou sincerely tomorrow." Zheng was confused again. "Ah? I don't think I'm angry with her, I'm already very manly, why should I thank her?" Chao Sunny said slowly, "There are some things, I just say some things, it seems that everyone deliberately does not say, in fact they have been deliberately saying it. Such kindness is of course very good, but in the long run, it may also be a burden. Sometimes it's better to be clear. If you don't avoid it, it runs away by itself. Avoiding it, it is just like our shadow, the way others look at us, the private discussions we think, just like the road of life. The daylight during the day and the moonlight at night, let us let go of something most in our hearts like a shadow." Of course, this kind of alternative company, there are good and bad, not necessarily all bad things, but this Brother Chao dare not say too much about the good and bad inside, as well as the specific size and proportion, which have different effects on our state of mind. But if you have any experience in the future, I can tell you more. Tan Yingzhou is not old big but careful. She deliberately acts as a villain on your side so that you can adapt to this awkwardness earlier, just like an open book exam. Zheng Yugan said suddenly, "Understood, Brother Chao is still very knowledgeable." Chao Yingqing smiled and said, "Compared with Mr. and Brother Cui, I am far behind." Zheng Yugan said, "That's just a comparison with junior uncle and Cui sect. It doesn't mean that senior Brother Chao's knowledge is not great." Chao Qingqing was speechless for a while. This tone really resembles my husband. No wonder Mr. Zheng likes Zheng Yugan so much. Unknowingly he walked to the door of the house. Zheng Yugan gently pushed the door, but didn't push it open. He pushed it again with gravity. It still didn't work and he hit the door. In this talk about Yingzhou he said, "Don't tie the door and don't tie the door." Chao Qingqing lifted his chin with a smile on his face, and signaled that Zheng Yugan, over the wall. An angry shout suddenly sounded inside the door. "Which little thief is outside the door? Just report the name, if it's the murderer, I will tell you there will be no return." Zheng Yu scratched his head dryly and was embarrassed when senior Brother Chao bumped into this scene. Tan Yingzhou said angrily, "Who is sacred with such a weird name that is called I? I advise you to show some sincerity. Since they are all people from the rivers and lakes who are eating at night, you can change your name and sit without changing your surname. Draw it out and compete with your grandmother. It doesn't matter if you ask a fist or a sword." Chao Qingqing walked a few steps forward and chuckled softly, "It's me, Chao Qingqing." Tan Yingzhou hurriedly opened the door. The little girl stood at the door, squeezing out a smile, and said with a shy expression, "I have seen Master Chao." Chao Yingqing smiled and nodded, "Excuse me, I won't go in, and I will ask Senior Longmen to ask about the authenticity of the Yellow River rushing picture." Tan Yingzhou nodded vigorously, not to mention trivial matters. "Master has said that this Mr. Chao has a lot of stamina on the road to practice, and his future achievements will not lose the same amount of senior sister Pei Qian." Out of the corner of Tan Yingzhou's eyes, he found Jing Yugan, who was standing by, squinting without squinting and showing no expression. The little girl felt better. Chao Yingqing walked alone at night, but did not return directly to his residence. Instead, he turned back to the Nayun pavilion, kicked his boots and sat cross-legged. Chao Qingchen's dojo at Shimiashashan Xingfeng. According to Chao Qingjing's vision, this so-called dojo is neither extravagant nor learning from those immortals and building civil engineering. The mansions are continuous qiangliyu, and it is not too simple. After all, those rare books, as well as some favorite calligraphy and paintings, are more precious and delicate, so there must be a 2-story small building dedicated to collecting books, and the literati study room usually has a name, and they used to sit around the furnace. Chao Sunny asked her husband to help him choose a name. The husband seemed to have a draft, and he gave the name of the study without hesitation. Suddenly fast. If the word hua is taken out alone, it is actually not a beautiful character, because both as a verb and a name, both have poor meaning. Some of them say that weeds and crops are mixed together, but once hua, it is completely different from the meaning of ran. For example, studying and pursuing academic studies, suddenly understood as if the suffering was healed. The most popular usage of suddenly enlightened can be used to describe a person's vision or a certain state of mind. In addition, Chao Sunny's name originally had the word lang in it. But at the moment when the husband gave the name of such a good study, Chao Sunny saw in his husband's eyes a kind of cautiousness that was quite strange, but not the first time he had seen it. The deepest part of the gentleman's face and eyes is guilt. It seems that this kind of high hope will make the husband feel guilty. What? Chao Sunny finally knew an answer. Back then, at the lotus roots in his hometown, Mr. Chin, who was not a husband, sent him to the school. Mr. Chin helped hold an umbrella and stood with him on the corner of the street. The husband held his umbrella and stopped. Why did he hesitate to speak several times? But he remained silent in the end, and then he continued on the road with himself. The husband is here, and he knows how to let a child through his heart and suffering. But at that moment, Mr. Chin still didn't dare to speak at the time, probably because Mr. felt that for a person who was still a child, he understood early, even if it was an excellent truth. The so-called understanding earlier is one kind of cruelty. Because there were two people of the same age living in Chao's ancestral home. Therefore, Mr. Chin is not willing to let a poor child who he thinks is already sensible, to become more sensible for a poor child who is ignorant. There is no such reason in the world. Chao Qingqing leaned against the pavilion column, but unfortunately he did not have the habit of carrying drinks with him. How could such a good gentleman be found by himself? After the millet grain left the house of the big white goose, he quietly returned. Anyway, he was idle. The leader Pei and the leader of the leader were discussing major issues. She is not big enough now. Found that the good man Shanju was sitting in the yard with green bamboo pipes of different lengths piled up at his feet. The millet grains squatted aside and saw the clues. They were the housekeepers of the good guys. They were building bamboo boxes. Xiaomili asked softly, "Good man Mountain Lord, can you make a bookcase for me too?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Of course, there is no problem." On the study tour to Disway Mountain Cliff Academy, the bamboo box made for Aquarius was already too small. Xiaomili said, "My book box can be made at the end, just use the remaining bamboo, it's small, it doesn't matter." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "This pile of bamboo is enough to make 3 bamboo boxes. The treasure bottle, it is dry and the millet grains are added, there is no problem." Chui Dongshan yelled at the desk in the house, "Sir." Qin Pingan didn't lift his head, "Go away." Chui Dongshan immediately smiled brightly and said, "Good. Sure enough, Mr. Sure enough, he is still the proud student, the least out of sight. The weather is cold, but the student's heart is warm. Sister Chow, junior brother Chow, have you ever been scolded by your husband?" Let alone being scolded, we have all been beaten. The big white goose continued to bury his head in the accounts, writing the accounts with a pen, and trying to crackle with the other. On the account book of Jianzong Qingping, because of the congratulatory ceremony, a lot of Guyuqian came out all of a sudden. During the Daquan dynasty, Li Shiling, the official book of the Ministry of Etiquette, brought 80 grains of rain money. For the Daquan Hushou who is now struggling, it can be said to have worsened the situation. 800 rain money from Yuguazong's side. Wealth and wealth are worthy of being our top spot in Tong Yezhou, Huanggeji and Yinshan in the blessed land of Jiang's cloud grottos. According to previous year's accounting, aside from the cost, on average the annual income is about 70 or 80 grain rain money. Not much? That's a lot. What's more, long-term benefits for a full 500 years. Chief Zhou doesn't make a move and he never disappoints as soon as he makes a move. Originally, Sovereign Chui wanted to conform to the hearts of the people and write a secret letter to a fairy somewhere in the wild world, to persuade the Chief Zhou, who is already half an outsider, if it's okay, don't come to Qingping Jianzong as a guest. We are all worried about Xiaomo's misunderstanding. Now it seems that this letter is still to be written, just not to write this sentence. It hurts the feelings, it is inappropriate. I have to recount the old with the Chief Zhou in the letter and ask for warmth. The chief worship of Luapa Mountain, since he is half an outsider of Shindu Mountain, he is also half of his own family. We Qingping Jianzong, we must welcome Chief Zhou home. In fact, Pei Qian had already secretly handed the handoff thing to Cui Dongshan with his master on his back. The big sister said that together with the things that are close by, plus the 1,000 grains of rain money, she can be regarded as lent to the younger brother and Qingping Jianzong, and no interest will be charged. Of course Cui Dongshan didn't dare to accept it, and he was obviously to be scolded by her husband, but at that time, looking at the attitude of the master sister, he never dared to accept it, and became afraid to refuse to accept it. It's better to be taught a few words by the husband in person than to be booked by the master sister. His mother, find an opportunity to confess by Xian's hero score, and see if he can write off all his debts on the side of the master sister. The old real Liang Shuang and the few distinguished guests, together with the gift, are less than 20 grain rain coins, but after all they are genuine grain rain coins. If they were converted into snow money, it would be a huge pile. There is also the Tongyin Ferry, which has been docked at the Qingshandu at the moment, and the Intercontinental Wind Kite Ferry, one big and one small as neighbors. Qin Pingan asked, there are probably how many sword repair embryos can be found in the Daquan dynasty in 60 years? Can you have a rough estimate? Cui Dongshan thought for a while. Tongyi's his kendo luck is really hard to describe in a word. According to common sense, within Jiazi, even if the territory of a country is dug 3 feet, it is estimated that they can only find to 2, 3. But after all, today is different. There is a husband here, and because the Yao family of Daquan can absorb the luck of a continent, the number can probably be doubled? Qin Pingan said, it's not easy on the Daquan side. 100 waste is waiting for prosperity. Money is needed everywhere, and it is necessary to maintain a frontier force that matches the first dynasty of Tonghizhao. After the mountain is cultivated, the rules are still the same. You can make a half-fold with the Oizumi husband for the heavenly materials and earth treasures they consume in refining the sword, and then report the amount. After Jiazi, if the Daquan dynasty is completely relieved, then there is no need to discount, as the fairy money is as much as it should be. Cui Dongshan hummed, listen to Mr. On the Pushun side, 2 land deeds worth at least 500 or 600 rain money were sent. One of the hills has been abandoned for many years, but it occupies a large area and has silver mines since ancient times. It has been mined or banned intermittently in history. It belongs to the private site of Pushun Yunkateng. The imperial court that recently restored Guizhou has long since opened the mountain. An enclave outside, because it was not a geomantic attraction, was able to escape the war. At the moment, there is a Xianxian sect who has reported on the Tianmu Academy, dozens of displaced genealogical monks. They all became Shanzi Yeshio, so they simply gathered together and held a group for warmth. It was considered to be a true sect. The first generation head was an old monk in the Longmen realm, because he had a little incense with Pushun, and Pushun was a consistent big it was only meant to save, so I took a few small summer money collected by the other party to sell iron and leased out the mountain. Previously, Planting Autumn said that this place can be used as a dojo for a golden core immortal, which is not a glorious word. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, Xiao has a good vision and just left the 3 most valuable old Dragon Palace collections. Otherwise it would not be estimated at 600 Guyuqian. How could the gift be doubled? Qin Pingan couldn't help but smiled and cursed. It was left to Hu Chuling by Mother Qiu, and then Hu Chuling is still your direct disciple, you still have the face to say this? Chen Pingan turned his head and looked at the millet grains. Right, millet grains? The millet grain scratched his face. It shouldn't be right. The reason why Cui Dongshan intends to keep accounts is mainly to carefully record the old treasures of the town's demon towers of fellow Taoists. There are too many books. Only those isolated books can be booked separately. The treasures of various colors are so accumulated. If less becomes more, the total price is naturally particularly impressive. In the past, the cultivator was in King Pingfeng's Patriarch Hall and said it was 1,200 Gaiuqian. It cannot be said to be a lily reporting the price, but this price belongs to the market price in the early years. Therefore there is a huge premium and there is no worry about sales at all, and it will only be rushed by the head. Will there be monks who feel that they have been killed? Come, just chop the side of Laozi's wallet. Therefore Mr. Chongqiu, the accountant of Qingping Sword Sect, was hesitant at first, but he was reprimanded by Sect Master Cui, and then quoted the price out of his conscience. Fortunately, that young fellow has now also become a chair in the ancestral hall. Registered worship. In addition, the fat goose's almost complete family background. Maybe this is the real big gift. After all, it was an ascending realm ghost from Emperor Fuyezo. Chen Pingan said, except for those belongings of Eugene that have already been returned, the remaining 40% should be kept untouched. In the future he may need Eugene's help to excavate the big blasphemy. By then, these will belong to the family of this ghost and immortal, and they just need to find opportunities to return one by one. Cui Dongshan was surprised and said, Sir, only 30% of Shindu Mountain is left. Chen Pingyan immediately stood up and was about to check the accounts. Cui Dongshan quickly closed the account books and said with a haha, it is 40% of the wrong memory. Chen Pingan sat back in the bamboo chair and continued to build the bamboo box. How many of them are there just for real Guyu money? Are you Qingping Jianzong crying poor with me? Cui Dongshan was struck by lightning, heartbroken, and said, Xiaomili, listen, what the husband said is you Qingping Sword Sect, is it fair? You say hurting people and not hurting others? The millet grain shook his head and made a grimacing face. You guys. We are down to the mountain, we are down to the mountain. Cui Dongshan leaned on the chair, kicked his legs and waved his sleeves. Millet hurried into the house, stood on tiptoe, reached out to cover his mouth, and whispered to the big white goose lying sideways on the handle of the chair. Although the ceremony is over, in fact, every mansion on Mishue Peak has its own guests visiting. For example, Zhang Shanfeng found the young sect master of Taihui Sword Sect, and said, Sect Master Lu, I can't drink enough. Baisho laughed so much that his stomach hurts. Lu Jinglong smiled and said, It's okay, I don't persuade you to drink. Helping Zhang Shanfeng and Baisho to pour 2 bowls of wine, Lu Jinglong raised the bowl in his hand, bumped gently with Zhang Shanfeng, and asked a long-timely curious question. Lu Jinglong explained with a smile, Of course I don't like drinking, but those who are encouraged by someone to come to me for a drink, since they are his friends, I think they are definitely worth knowing. The young Taoist drank a big sip of wine and smiled. To be honest, being able to drink at the same table with Sovereign Lu was something that I couldn't even think about 20 years ago. Lu Jinglong smiled and said, Surely there are not many people who believe in this kind of words. I'll count one. The whitehead suddenly sighed, the one who is most proud of the world and the one in the wild world and the white clothes in the north of Luzhou, North Ju plus my whitehead, our surname is by, on the mountain the surname. Zhang Shanfeng began to seriously ponder the mountain monks surnamed Zhang. Lu Jinglong felt helpless. Baisho took a sip of the wine and nodded to himself. I heard that the person who killed the dragon was surnamed Qin, plus the mellow scholar who carried the sun and the moon in Nanpasuazhou, and my good brother Qin Pingan, whose surname was Qin. Yes, it's second best. Qiu Du brought his vinegar to visit the 3 monks of Shi building in Old Yezigang. Luo Pashan Zhang LV lived a long life, and brought his protege disciple Nailan Yubi as well as the old Jia, who is the second manager of Fengyuan Ferry, to find the Taoist couple Wu Go and Xiao Mening together. Old Shinxian Jia took the initiative to become a cook, put on an apron and personally fried a few dishes with wine. This naturally made the Taoist couple flattered, mainly because they hadn't really adapted to the style of Qingping Sword Sect. I believe they would not be fussing about such things soon. Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui took the initiative to find Yu Guizong. The place where the latter was staying was the premier mansion on Mi Xiefeng. This is one of the reasons why in many sect celebrations, certain genealogical monks are willing to grit their teeth and give a share of money, but also have to sharpen their heads to participate. It's not just a matter of confusing a familiar face, but a lot of real sales, big business really just got together to talk about it. Of course, for Lu Kaishan, it is definitely not in this list. On the way there, Yu Panshui smiled and said, even if it is the celebration of the beginning of the zone, you can receive so many grains of rain money in one go. Isn't it a few? Lu Jubao nodded and said, last time Weishi might be among the 5 realms. The last time it was probably Yu Xian who created the next sect again. Once the next sect of a certain sect and then there is a next sect, then it can be promoted to authentic, or honored as ancestral court. This is one of the few in Howren's history. Zhong Kuei took the fat man and went to chat with old General Yao, and it happened that the 3 of Pushen were also there. Eugene found a strange thing. Zhong Kuei saw the Huang Yun. He was still a bit shy and his voice was different and he was pretending to be gentle there. Thinking of my Gusu, a dignified and man, I really can't get used to Zhong Kuei's piety, so tired. After drinking alcohol and leaving the house, Zhong Kuei found that the fat man beside him had noses and eyes, not eyes, so he said that Cui Dongshan was willing to return 60% of his family. The fat man immediately bent his knees, grabbed Zhong Kuei's arm with both hands, tears in his eyes, crying and trembling, and shouted, Brother Zhong Kuei, there is no way to repay such a great kindness, let the little brother be so good. Zhong Kuei shook his wrists and sneered, next time there will be a wine bureau, you can drink it with the dog. Fatty's eyes complained, I'm not afraid to steal the limelight from Brother Zhong at the wine table. Zhong Kuei pushed the fat man's head away. Eugene lowered his voice and asked, Brother Zhong, are you interested in Huang Yun? It's a coincidence that our brothers have similar eyes. For the sake of brothers, why don't you reluctantly cut love for the sake of brothers? Do you need me to help matchmaking? Dealing with women, especially this is such an extremely brilliant woman, the younger brother is still very talented. Zhong Kuei smiled and said, what do you want? That is, when I was young I admired Yi Shanju very much. Of course I like it, but it has nothing to do with the kind of love between men and women. Eugene sighed, I admire Zhong Kuei's frank and upright gentleman. When he talked about women, Eugene stomped his feet with anger. This Qin Pinyin, should he be the grandest guest of the whole land of flowers? Just think about it again, touch his conscience to speak, this kid is so young and promising, and with such a sense of responsibility. If I were him, walking sideways would be regarded as me. Zhong Kuei walked slowly, looking up at the sky. How many people come to see Mingyue? Who knows that Mingyue sees it? Zhongqiu found Xiaopaxian, Menglong and Shiqiu. Zhongqiu came here to convey 2 things. One is Wu Yi in Xiang Mansion within Huang Tinghua. She is very likely to enter Tonggishao in the near future. She is not going to travel but intends to officially settle in Tonggishao. Wu Yi is willing to take the initiative. Xiaopaxian smiled and looked at the maid beside him. Menglong's name on the mountain and water genealogy now is Dugu Menglong. She smiled and nodded. Since her son has no objection, of course she is happy to see it happen. After planting autumn, I took out 2 pictures, a picture of the situation in the middle of Tonggishao, and a section of the Rin River. Tell the 3 people that the Rin River will become one of the new major rivers in the future, Xiaopaxian. Staring at the 2 scrolls, thinking for a moment, said, our future choices of the 5 sacred mountains may have to be slightly changed. Once the country is established, in addition to the location of the capital, it will also need to enshrine the 5 mountain monarchs, invite the of water to open the mansion, gather the scattered refugees, etc., and these big and small things need to still rely on the many tilts of the Qingping sword sect. People on the mountain, the minister of the dragon. Sure enough, the road-numbered Dragon Gate has promised Huang Ting to become a registered worship of Taiping Mountain. So in 2 days after going down the mountain he will bring his disciples to talk about Yingzhou, follow Huang Ting in Hushan to enshrine on Negative Mountain, and go to the old site of Taiping Mountain. This immortal has already sent a letter back to Tai Shushan with Fei Jian, telling the senior sister who is now the abbot of the sect affairs that he is going to stay in Tonggishao for another 1.5 years. For the monks of the upper 5 realms, it takes several years or even decades to go out for a trip, which is very common. In addition, he also used his personal relationship to send a few secret letters to Zhongtu Shenzhou, inviting a few engineers and builders from the mountain who were also from the monster clan, and invited them to visit Tonggishao. Miyu, Chuiwei, Xiaomo, and the 3 Jianxiu are rare to get together. In addition, there is a Qin Tong who seems to be unfamiliar with anyone in Shindu Mountain, and is the only one who is more familiar with, but actually doesn't want to be familiar with it. They also called on the 2 young sword repairmen who had made an exception to participate in the discussion of the Patriarch Hall, Yu Xianhui, He Gu. Miyu, who was promoted to be the chief worshipper of Qingping Jianzong, and his direct disciple Higu, the dojo and mansion will be built on the Yunshang peak of Xindu Mountain. Zhanglu Tsuwei, disciple Yu Xianhui, the dojo is built on the Tianbian peak of Xindu Mountain with cacti. And these two swordsmen on the Great Wall of Jianxi in their hometown have never accepted disciples, so the two children at the moment are both of them. A great disciple of the mountain in the positive sense. As for Xiao Mo's temporary dojo on Qingping Jianzong's side, it was the simplest. There was no one. Just at the foot of Xindu Mountain, there was a hut on the other side of Baotan which was considered to be a dojo. A group of people sat by the big brazier. Miyu bent over and stretched out his hands to warm up the fire, raised his head and smiled. You two are not stupid. You know why the hermit sir pulled you over to listen to the discussion, right? Higu was not willing to pay attention to this infamous master in his hometown, not to mention a meaningless and knowing question. He was dull. Wuxia nodded back and said, I know, because our two destined flying swords can do a little bit of help for the hermit. Anyway, it is equal to swordsmanship and can travel in mountains and rivers. Why not do it? Xiao Mo smiled and said, It's Qingping sword sect. Wuxia replied, It's nothing different. Cui Wei didn't say anything. It's really no different. That is to say, Qingping Jianzong, otherwise the difference here would be bigger in another mountain. In the history of Haoran, the next sect leader fell out with the ancestor Master Hall, or had a very stiff relationship. Although it is not too common, it is not an exception. The most exaggerated one was on a big mountain on Luxiazu. The site was chosen to build the next clan in Jinjiazu. For some reason, he directly announced that he had separated from the previous clan and reported to the world through the Shanshui Mansion report. Although it failed in the end, there was a lot of trouble and it is still a joke on the mountain. That sect, after this infighting within a few years from the next sect master, including the ruler, chief priest and guest, all changed people, and the upper and lower sects became in harmony with each other. The next sect, which was originally thriving, quickly went downhill. It is not easy to establish a next sect, and it is even more difficult to condense when people's hearts are distracted. Miyu laughed and said, I am not a member of the Patriarch Hall, but I can make an exception to participate in the discussion. Not only in Qingping Jianzong but also in Luapa Mountain, it is the first thing, so you two can really be proud of it. Wuxia turned his lips back. Master Shuang's hands folded his sleeves. What a real skill! Higu nodded in agreement. Among the 9 sword fairy embryos, Higu is the tallest. His natal flying sword Flying Peak is extremely mysterious. As long as the flying sword is sacrificed, it seems that he naturally possesses a kind of innate magical power that can command mountains. Of course, the scale of the mountain range driven by the flying sword would be directly linked to Higu's realm. The house of the He family is not on Taixiang Street or Yuhu Street, but it has a profound background, and the sword repairs of the He family's ancestors all come from the line of criminal officials. Therefore, the ancestral dagger hanging from Higu's waist, reading maid, has a high rank. If it were on the Great Wall of Jianxi, Higu's natal flying sword Flying Peak would not appear to be outstanding, so according to the ranking of the Summer Palace, it can only be listed as the second inferior at most, but it has come to Haoran. The world, however, can directly raise 2 small steps, and Feilai Peak can completely rank among the Yishang. And as the realm of Xianhui climbs in the future, as long as you can choose a suitable battlefield with people asking for the sword, it is almost equivalent to the great monk sitting in Xiaoxiandi, and his killing power skyrocketed. As for Yu Xianhui's natal Feijian Pozi Ling, not only was it on Haoran Xianxia's side, it had a taboo meaning, and it was not even recorded in the Great Wall of Jianxi and the Summer Palace. Because once Yu Xiaohui can grow into the upper 5 realm swordsmen, especially the Great Sword Immortal, then it will be a kind of death and injury to the Monster Clan Chi practitioners, especially those of the upper 5 realm Monster Clan cultivators whose real names are leaked. I don't know where the unsuspecting disaster came from. If you give a less appropriate metaphor, Yu Xiaohui is in a sense Deijiangxian Yu Xiaohui, assuming that a person who can participate in the discussion of Qingtu in the future is Yu Xiaohui. It's like a Xiao Beis. Those who knew the real name of the monster clan by Yuxian back, and the monks of the same realm, would be injured if they led the sword. Those whose realm is lower than that of the oblique return will die if they receive the sword. Cui Wei said, From now on, I will practice swords on Xindu Mountain. Higu almost couldn't hold it back, so he wanted to say something about you, nascent soul realm, and am ashamed to tell me that there are none? Just for some reason, he squinted at his nominal master, the face that has remained constant throughout the year, perhaps a little softer in the light of the fire. Higu still nodded. Miyu rubbed his chin and had to follow, slanting back, So do you? As a result, you slanted back and directly said, "Ah, don't learn to speak from the hermit, I am doing swords, it's your shit." Higu laughed and glanced at the paralyzed face. Chui Wei twitched the corners of his mouth and smiled rarely. Xiao Mo bowed his head and turned over the rice dumplings on the wire net. They were only delicious when they were roasted golden brown. Qing Tong was in a complicated mood and he didn't like sword repair, which really made sense. It was just getting bright. At noon today, Yu Guizhong would take his own ferry to leave the Qingping sword sect boundary. Lu Jubao and Yu Panshui had already left Mishue Peak last night. Su Hao also greeted Yu Guizhong, went down the mountain alone, and took the lead in returning to Yuzhou to drive the mountain crossing. Chen Pingan made a special trip to see off. Today, under the leadership of Bai Xian, he pulled up the millet grains and the others and came to Qiuji to play together. In fact, Qiuji had already given Bai Xian the address of Jiu Yifeng's receiving sword room yesterday. After the two parties had made an appointment, Fei Jian would often contact him. Of course, Bai Xian had not forgotten to secretly hint that Qiuji had no money in his pocket. "I don't have a lot of money on hand. The family property like Jinshan and Yinshan is all placed on the side of Luapa Mountain." Qiuji said that it was all right, and when he returned to Jiu Yifeng, he hurriedly sent a letter to Mi Xiefeng, where he would put a few immortal money in it. Bai Xian patted Qiuji on the shoulder at that time. "I'm not very old and I have a lot of inspiration. I will follow me in the future. We have 2 swords and we are invincible. Who is not cutting? By the way, at Jiu Yifeng, if you have someone who is uncomfortable and can't beat you, say hello to me and tell me the general route of the other person's journey down the mountain. Anyway, after a few days my realm will be swooning. Swish up, when the time comes I will just go out alone with Master Hermit, stop him on the road and help you. Give that guy to that, huh? Understand?" Qiuji heard his scalp numb and shook his head quickly and said, No, Jiu Yifeng inside and out is very good to me." He was a little regretful that he had stamped his handprint on that hero book. Today, Qiuji went out alone and followed by Xian and the others for a stroll around Mishue Peak. The little girl named Chai Wu suddenly asked Qiuji if there was any drink at Jiu Yifeng. Qiuji said truthfully, Jiu Yifeng does not produce Xinjia wine, because sect master Wei does not like to drink too much. Chai Wu didn't say anything. Qiuji quickly added one sentence, "But the Dikui wine from the Thrush Peak and the several wines from the Yunku Fudi are very famous in our Tongizhou." Chai Wu nodded with bright eyes, saying that if she had a chance to travel abroad in the future, she might go to Jiu Yifeng as a guest. However, the little girl felt that it had been suspended recently, and it would take decades to go down the mountain. Alas, the aptitude is too bad, and even Qin Shanju retired when he was teaching swordsmanship and immortality on his side. Worry people are really worried people. I heard from Mi de Jianxian that there used to be a man named Dong on the Great Wall of Jianqi, who was a good friend of Qin Shanju. Envy is true envy. The black girl named Zhou Mili, who is also a green bamboo stick and a golden pole, didn't talk much, but her identity was not simple. Qiuji was really taken aback when he learned that she was the guardian of Luapa Mountain in Qingping Peak's Patriarch Hall for the first time. Millet took out the only remaining melon seeds from the cotton shoulder bag and gave them to Qiuji, saying that they were melon seeds bought at xianxia market. Don't dislike it. The main reason was that I went back to my house last night, patronizing the brand new bamboo box on my back, and forgot to recruit troops, and then Bai Xian came here early in the morning. Qiuji took the melon seeds and quickly said no. The millet grain pursed his mouth and smiled. Qiuji glanced at his peer named Sun Chun Wang. King Sun Chun always seemed to be like this, looking at him coldly, always showing a disgusting expression on his face. Qiuji was a little depressed. Suddenly became not so happy. At noon the group found Monk Yu Guizhong, and went down the mountain to the King Shandu together. In addition to Qin Pingan and Chui Dongshan, they also brought Mi Yu and Chui Wei to plant autumn. It can be said that the entire Qingping Jianzong who is really in charge has all appeared on the stage. That meeting was over, and he treated the guests so solemnly, only to say that Yu Guizhong couldn't fault him anymore. When he arrived next to the ferry of Yu Guizhong, Qin Pingan said straightforwardly, "In Shangyanshang we had a lot of discussions before, but Sect Master Chui and I could only deliberately speak more bluntly." Jianghu found that the young hidden official's Yu Yen had a share of his own. It was a little accidental. The young master of the Cloud Cave blessed land still smiled and clasped his fists in return, and said something that was not against his heart. "Can understand." Zhang Fenggu said frankly, "If both of us, Yu Guizhong and Qingping Jianzong, one north and one south, we can truly recognize each other's style and style of conduct through the cumbersome affairs of blasphemy, and then we will come back to formally." Even if the covenant is concluded, I personally look forward to that day. Wang Ji has a violent temper. Didn't he complain before that Qingping sword sect was too arrogant, and he simply didn't give you Guizhong a little bit of face? The alliance is obviously a good thing for both sides to benefit, and the other party is hypocritical. What? It was just that after a detailed explanation by Zhang Fenggu last night, he quickly became angered. Wang Ji just inevitably sighed with emotion. In the arena at first sight you can live and die. Your mountain is really not good. After all, Wang Ji had just entered the ancestor hall of the Yuguizhang Shinzong Peak just a few years ago. At that time, Zhang Fenggu could only say with a wry smile, probably like the river winding around the land, it will eventually rush to the sea. Wang Ji nodded silently, hoping so. Otherwise, if Yu Guizhong and Qingping Jianzong broke up, the consequences would be disastrous. Tonggishao, my hometown, really can't stand up to this kind of infighting. Cui Dongshan clasped his fists and smiled and said, Mister, if you don't complain, you have to blame me. Intentionally or unconsciously, Qin Pingan walked side by side with Wang Ji and said in his heart, Mr. Qingjie, maybe our Qingping sword sect's actions on this matter are really not so happy and profitable, so it's just a lot of hard work? I hope that we will continue to do so. The two sides can form an alliance and I will have a good drink with Mr. Qingjie, even if it fails. In Tonggishao, the mountains and rivers are so vast that I will not walk the single plank bridge. Wang Ji was taken aback and smiled heartily. That's a good thing. Cui Dongshan smiled. No matter what the husband and the Qingjie said. In the same way for yourself, it may be useless. But for the husband it will be believed. How can I find such a gentleman? If it weren't for an outsider, I had to cry to my husband. Cui Dongshan hugged the back of his head with his hands and looked around. In the fairy that he named Qingshan, he would gradually become more and more blooming, with luxuriant vegetation and spring all year round. The former husband, on the way back to his hometown, led a thin horse, followed the water, turned the hillside, the ancient sun-setting road, and 3 or 2 lonely villages beside the road. The mountain is thinner and the water is thinner, and the horse thinner is thinner. The sun and the moon drive the time, and the rivers and lakes move the hearts of the guests. In the spring breeze of the new year, flowers bloom again on Moshang. The next time the husband goes out for a long trip and returns home again, he will definitely not be full of sorrow. Sword of Coming Chapter 963. Long Xinpu stared at the delicate young man with a tiger head hat. Could it be that it turned out to be? For a while I just feel dizzy, the world is spinning. Absolutely, for sure, it must not be. You must know that even in the Qingming world, there are countless numbers of worshipping, admiring and fascinating the most proud Taoist official in the world. And Long Xinpu is one of them, not to mention that this Long Master also has a Tao friend, and he sews hundreds of Bai-Yes poems on his body. If that guy sees this one in front of him, it is estimated that he will lose his heart on the spot. Long Xinpu quickly took out a jug of wine, raised his head and drank it slowly. At the moment the people who came to Jianpu Lake were Sun Daochang, Bai Yi and Yanzhua. Is because I've just used to let the 2 disciples meet the 3 Pingshui friends of the Spring Society as fate friends. They get along well and it's hard to get out of the door. I'll talk a few more words because I have more friends on the mountain just outside the Taoist temple. There are a few more ways to go between the world. Sun Daochang stretched out his hand and waved and said in amazement, It's a different kind of beautiful makeup, fragrant and overflowing, and it is tangy. You can almost ashame the Ruizhu Palace lady ashamed to see people. Yanzhua's scalp numb. The old Guanju said that the world has no bamboo shoots. The dragon master in front of him had once served as the prime minister, chief assistant, or protector of the country in several countries in Yongzhou. Probably in the last few hundred years, they all resigned in one day and started the wandering life again. Outside of Bingjie Mountain, more than a dozen large and small dojos have been opened. I heard that the most recent one is on the banks of the Xuanhuan River in that Mijo. Long Xinpu was full of strong Yongzhou local accent, sighing, There is still a glockenspiel. I have never brought it in Jinzhou today, so I can't play it for you. The 2 sides talked about each other and the chicken and the duck talked about it. Feed the fish again? You can't say that, I have both drinks and food. Sun Daochang sneered and said, This is a job of picking up people's spit, but also to sway the market, pretend to be a ghost and throw it into another world. A lot of age, not ashamed. Long Xinpu smiled and said, You can't say that. In a certain place over there, it's a jade realm. How can it be considered as a ghost? And besides, if it weren't for the old master and the Qin Xiaodao friend, I wouldn't have to work hard. Take a long trip. Sun Daochang glanced at Long Xinpu. How did he get hurt? It's because he didn't get the name of his sect and he is going to hang up? Before the soldiers are resolved, do I need help from the poor Dao to protect the Dao? Although Long Xinpu likes to be a monster at the foot of the mountain, his reputation on the mountain is actually good. It can barely be regarded as a good relationship and friends all over the world. If you really want to care about it, it's really rare for a gas trainer to leave Qizhou and take the initiative to find the door. Long Xinpu smiled bitterly and didn't care about the old-fashioned ridicule. I blame myself, I can't blame others, it's too big. Oh, what do you say? Sun Daochang smiled and asked, is it secretly fighting with Dao's second child? Do you consider yourself a Baolin Daoist? Even if you are invincible with the sword, you can stand in the undead again and again. Long Xinpu automatically ignored those strange words of Daochang's son, and asked, this place is suitable for chatting? Daochang's son nodded and said, you can chat casually. Long Xinpu sincerely admired, today's old master is really enviable. After that, Long Xinpu didn't hide anything, but the old Guanju deliberately prevented Yanzhuo from hearing this person's voice. It turned out that the famous dragon master used to follow the clues and went to Runyue Peak to find a hard mountain worship. He has never climbed, nor did he need to climb. As a result, at the foot of the mountain, Long Xinpu, who was fully prepared, only said 4 words. It directly hurts the fundamentals of the road. He vomited a big mouthful of blood on the spot. Like a mess, the threads are tightly wrapped with different colors, purple, yellow, red, and cyan. It fell directly. Because Long Xinpu's 4-character admonishment is too rebellious. The building will fall. Sun Daochang heard the outline and process of Long Xinpu's account, closed his eyes and quickly returned to his usual look, sneered, you guys one by one, can you talk about the Grandmaster and the demeanor of the predecessors? You can't catch the hardworking person. Just shovel the wool to death, it's not authentic. If it wasn't for the hardworking little friend of Runyue Peak, there would be a more vivid metaphor for the old master. You should be queuing to visit the kiln. Long Xinpu had weird eyes. After all, after Daozu and Lu Qin, the third cultivator to climb Runyue Peak was the old master in front of him. Sun Daochang saw through the other party's thoughts at once and said with no good air, Pan Dao can be the same as you? Pang Dao was about to travel far away from home in the past, so he went to Runyue Peak and said goodbye to the hardworking little friend. Troublesome little friend, my son and grandson Wang Yuanlu, that little devil head, and the latest, Qin Xiaodaoyu. They are all nicknames from Daochang's son to the younger generations on the mountain. Just for the sake of Long Xinpu's decline, be kind to him and say a few words from the bottom of his heart. Daochang's son said, that is to say, Dao ancestor has a lot of aura, otherwise one finger will crush you to death. Among the mountain monks in the Qingming world, there is a resounding saying about this hairpin man, the ancestor of Bingjishan, 3 falls and 2 sores. It's not that you're like Yao Qing who successfully slashed 3 corpses and you've gotten a corpse, but that you have fallen 3 times, the first time you fell from an immortal to a Yupu, and then you fell from the Ascendant realm twice. In the end he was re-entered into the Ascension realm. No wonder others, if you want to complain, you blame yourself. It's easy to change your temperament. Generally you don't cause trouble. Every time you cause trouble it's a big deal. Yupu immortal, soaring immortal. Sun Daochang raised his left hand, breaking his fingers to forget, then raised his right hand. I can't count with one hand, you deserve to be the Dragon Master of Yongzhou. I fell through the boundary and then fell again playing around. Long Xinpu suddenly uttered a headless speech. In the past I did not bend my waist for 5 buckets of rice, but now you can bow your heads for 6 buckets of rice. You all listen to my unreasonable words. It is the first principle for a person to argue injustice and slander. Sun Daochang looked unhappy and sneered, I just want to go to the poor Taoist Xuandu temple as a guest. How about arranging you to clean the latrine? Later when Lu Lao-san is here you can still help and treat the guests. Yanzhuo was very impressed. When someone else said this he was just cursing. Sun Daochang said it unexpectedly, there is no charm. Long Xinpu said for no reason. Back then the statue of Wenxing was moved out of the Zhongtu Confucian temple, and I strongly opposed it. It was not without reason that Yanzhuo suddenly discovered that this guy was scolded by Daochang Sunday. Long Xinpu's words were obviously addressed to the tiger-headed young man. He learned from Daochang's son, and took the initiative to show his favor as soon as possible. It's too costly and time-consuming and labor-intensive may not be pleased. The rise of Bai Yi in this life is unstoppable. It is an established fact that the blind can see. The right time, the place and the people, are all in the body of Sword Xiu Bai Yi. Forget it, just treat this person as really white. Hearing this, Bai also nodded in greeting. It is to help the old scholar to get this love. Sun Daochang smiled and said, you can count as a green onion. I like to travel down the mountain, wander around, not idle a little bit, either spreading sages or composing nursery rhymes. According to speculations by good people, the prophecies and ballads of the three inner states in Yongzhou for the past 2,000 years have been half-spoken. In Sun Daochang's words, it was just a fart at someone's door and the fart sounded like thunder, and that's the case, the wind would blow away, but if you pulled a pile of at the door of someone's door, you would get revenge. Daochang's son asked, next, are you going to Yongzhou? Zhu Xian, the little girl from the Yufu dynasty, is not afraid of the sky and has a very good appetite. It is not in vain to help her protect her secretly. Long Xinpu didn't conceal anything and confessed openly, that is necessary, I have always liked to join in the fun, how can I miss that big gluttony, it is a grand event that has not been encountered in Yongzhou for hundreds of years. Since Dao Fa is not good, it is not comparable to Luqin, Gaogu and the like, then some personnel cannot be counted by pinching their fingers just by observing from the side. Only by entering the game first and then going ashore can you gain something. I believe that the viewer can't see it anymore. I have run out of time. I just thought about seeing her the last time and opening the door to help. Don't stop me from looking for her. As for whether you can see her inside, just see my own ability is better, so, this request is not too much, right? Not too much is not too much. Then there is no more text. Long Xinpu said helplessly, this is boring, so I'll give you a correct sentence. Daochang's son suddenly became puzzled, Pan Dao just can't figure it out. You and Bing Shishan have no hatred with Bai Yujing. Besides, there is a Fuchuan in your mountain. The aptitude is so good, otherwise there would be no such nicknames as Zhang Fenghai No. 2 and Yongzhou Yaoqing. At the beginning, Xian Du Guan had never disputed with you. Otherwise, Fu Quan, this child would already be practicing in Xian Du Guan, you said. What are you stumbling about, with small arms and thin legs? The one who found you today was so poor. One day I was hit by true invincible. I twisted my at random so I can't be like a grasshopper? The young monk in Bingjishan who deserves the title of genius, named Fuchuan and the Taoist named Xianshan, is a close disciple of the contemporary Bingjishan mountain master. If it weren't just past the age, with 10 young people and 10 alternates in the world, Fuchuan would definitely have a place. Long Xinpu smiled in his heart, Xingyang Mountain. Daochang's son was stunned, what the hell? Long Xinpu said, there is a mountain on Beipingzu called Xingyang Mountain, which is a sect that has just entered the sect. Sun Daochang smiled and said, I really want to go to the Xuandu to see the floor. The poor Dao made you wish. Pin Dao traveled the vast world not long ago. Do you know this sword immortal like cloud, Xingyang Mountain? Xuantugwan, the peach blossoms are in full bloom. The grandson of the road named King Shan sits under a peach tree with his hands folded and his eyes closed. Taolin sat idle, picking his sword and crossing his knees. The stream and the moon are sparse, and the mountain peaches are as bright as blood. When Long Xinpu saw the girl-like grandson from the same hometown he was thinking of, he was a little shy and his voice was not loud, long time no see. The eyebrows are Jumaifing and the eyes are Zeladu. She is still as beautiful as she was in the past. The beauty of the woman you like is always so touching, so beautiful that the eyes of the sun and the moon can't hold her. Wang's son raised her head to look at the famous Long Master, not to mention being a fellow countryman. She nodded and said in a crisp voice, it seems that it has been a long time. Old people, old acquaintances, reunion are most afraid of the old things that can be talked about, and there is nothing to say with a few polite greetings. Fear when you are afraid, the old things are the old things. Wang's son seemed to feel too insincere to sit and talk, but as soon as she was about to get up, Long Xinpu sat on the ground, gently tossed a few petals of peach blossoms by his feet, and asked softly, Daoist Kongshan, I can't drink? Wang's son smiled and said, what is the problem? Long Xinpu took out a pocket jug made of green glaze, only the size of a fist, and took a sip of the drink with his head up. When I first saw her, she passed me slowly, and the barren land was full of flowers. The miserable green boy traveled all over the spring, and Luoqi was full of flowers, which seemed to be the most favored, the most prince and grandson or the king. Son just Wang Sunday. I met Qing Chu at the age of 9 and met Qing Shiwu in his 90s. The boy rode a bamboo horse and turned around the pasque flower. There are 1,000 words but I don't know where to start. After a long silence, Long Xinpu just laughed at himself. I have a bad aptitude. You look down on it. It's normal. Wang's son frowned slightly and said, it's not such a thing at all. Long Xinpu courageously retorted, "In fact, that's how it is. Just imagine if I had that truly invincible swordsmanship or the Taoism taught by Zhang, would you not look at it more and listen more patiently? What about me?" Wang Sun thought for a while. It seems that this is really the case. But in fact, Master Long knew very well that it was not such a thing at all. My own realm is high and my fame is big. It's nothing more than letting Wang Sun look at and listen to a few more sentences. After all, it has nothing to do with liking. The reason why he was so noisy is that he wanted to say a few more words to her, so as not to be cold and speechless. Stunned. If it's just embarrassment, it doesn't matter, for fear that she will feel embarrassed and have nothing to say, just a polite sentence or two, and then she turns around and leaves. The unrequited love in the world seems to be so worthless. But if it is valuable, why bother with love? Long Xinpu cautiously said, "Persuade Bai Yi to take the role of Du Talk or the Lord of the Palace. I can try and see if it can help you. It is best if you are busy. If you can't help, you have nothing to lose." Wang Sun seemed to be slightly surprised. She nodded and said without hesitation, "Whether it is successful or not, thank you first here." Long Xinpu fell silent, and the act of looking for words without words was actually not easy. Wang Sun said, "It's an amazing thing to enter the Ascendant Realm twice." Long Xinpu laughed at himself. "It's okay." Wang Sun raised his brow. Long Xinpu immediately changed his words, "It's really good." Regarding the newly released list of the 10 people in the world, Long Xinpu hesitated to say something, worried. He was the ancestor of this business, and knew best about the doorways and dangers hidden here. If it hadn't been for this inexplicable list that spread the world, Long Xinpu would actually not come to Xuanduguan to see Wang Sunday. The newest 10 people in the Qingming world. 11 people to be exact. Yudou, Lu Xin, Bixiao Dongzhu, Wuzhou, Sun Huaizhong, Lin Jiangxian, Wushuangjiang, Gaogu, Yaoqing, Wang Sun. Hard work. In fact, in the world before this, no matter how good people give their lists in their minds, 10 people are 10 people. This is because the last time the young and alternate 10 people in the world made a start, and the list of 10 people happened to be 11. It seems that this has formed a tradition. Long Xinpu smiled dryly and said, "Father Kongshan Taoist, there were 10 people that day." Wang Sun said bluntly, "According to the level of Taoism and the level of lethality, I shouldn't be among the 10 people, at most I will be thrown into the waiting list behind." Long Xinpu sighed heavily. There are a huge number of alternate candidates, a full 21 people. Except for the headed monk Jianghu, an unknown person, he is clearly defined as the 11th in the world, and the remaining 20 people are ranked regardless of high or low. There is indeed no way to distinguish these great monks and martial arts masters. Maybe many people have never met each other, and many mountain monks in the last 1,000 or hundreds of years have not done anything at all, and have never discussed Taoism or swordsmanship with anyone. On the 12th floor of Baiyujing 5th City, there are 3 Taoist officials waiting on the list. The first Deputy City Lord of Nanhua City, Zi Suyuanjun Mrs. Wei. This woman's crown, by Huang Tingguan of the Qingming world, is jointly revered as the first generation of ancestors. Mrs. Wei received a lot of disciples. Among them was a direct disciple who was in charge of 100 flowers in the world. The owner of Ziki Lu Jiangzhama. The lord of the Jinyue Palace in the Biyun building, the old man is named Huang Jiesho, the road number is Weiing, and the name is Xuanhuan. In addition to sitting in the Xianxia cave of Jinyue Palace, he is also responsible for the high-ranking piece. Armor. There is a library of books, called Do Not Teach a Day to Spend a Day. The old Taoist priest hangs a string of keys weighing several kilograms all the year round. It is said that the reason why he called himself Xuanhuan is because Taoist ancestors personally gave the word Xian, which is probably also a kind of plaque for the library building. Deus's performance in placing high hopes on Huang Jiesho. The predecessor and the current host of Biyun Tower are the disciples and redisciples of the old real person, because Huang Jiesho and Lingbao City Lord Pang Ding with the Taoist name Modest are people of similar age. According to the mountain's algorithm, the Jiazi or the 100-year-old generation is considered to be the same year of the mountain chi practitioners. In addition, there is the saying that the 1,000-year-old generation is a senior generation. Huang Jiesho and Pang Ding, these 2 peer veteran Taoists, actually have a longer period of cultivation than the 2 head teachers of Baiyujing, Yudou and Luqian. If it only talks about age, not about identity, except for the name of the great master teacher, the rest of the heavenly immortal Taoists are their juniors on the mountain. If you add to the Ascension Realm sword repairman who is now practicing in the Baiyujing Xinxiao City, Haosu, the last criminal officer of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Then Bai Yujing would have 4 candidates. In the Qingxin dynasty of Bingzhou, the national teacher Bai O, the end martial artist, the 3rd person in the world of martial arts. The 1st person on the mountain in Ruzhou, Mr. Zhu. The latest road number, LV Ping. The 11th in the world, which used to be firmly established in the past, is now taken over by Jianghu, who was born out of nowhere. In Yenzhou, a loose swordsman named Nie Bixia, who has been in the clouds and water for 3,000 years, has been wandering around and has been missing for a long time. However, it is rumored that her natal lamp placed in the Huayang Palace in Daifishan has never been seen for thousands of years. Extinguished, there have always been divergent opinions about the whereabouts of Nie Bixia. Some say that she has actually gone to practice swords outside the sky, some say that she may be outside the sky, using the outside world to strengthen the sword, and even said that she went to the Western Buddhist country. Zhuzhou, the master of the Qingxi Palace, the master of the contemporary palace master Xuanhuan, the Taoist name is Nanyang Fish, is proficient in the Tao of Fulu, and has created several large symbols, nicknamed the literary poet, but the most famous Tao no, but somehow the 100 killers spread around. It is rumored that Xuanhuan was responsible for the cultural fate of the 2 states, and he is very hopeful that he will be among the 14th realms. Baolin Sanxiu, she is also a female sword repairer in the Ascension realm. One of her most prestigious things is the gratitude and enmity, with Zhen Invincible. Of course, it has nothing to do with love between men and women. The female founder of Liangjingshan, Chaoga, Taoist name Fu Zhen. In addition to the palace at the age of the year, the keeper of the year will fall in vain. It is said that Bai Yu Jinglu Zhangjiao has a very high evaluation of this person, whether it seems to be overestimated, but in fact it is still underestimated. It's a pity that Bai Luo has almost never discussed the truth with others. A Shanin feather guest, surnamed Wang and named Tai, likes to raise geese. In the Qingming world, in addition to the 14 states, there are actually small 4 states, which are actually 4 islands in the Big Lake, the largest of which is not inferior to Yongzhou. Wang's surname is one of the 2 lake owners in the name of this giant lake. Another lake owner, a female cultivator of Thunderstorm, was born in a demon clan and was Relia. The female champion Yang Qing, the road name Mirage, was born in the Yang family of Hongnong Yuzhou, and she is also the owner of the Sea Mountain Immortal Pavilion in Shoshan Pavilion. In addition, there are a pair of twin sisters, but they have different surnames and follow their parents' surnames. One is named Su Mian with extremely beautiful appearance, and the other is named Su Yinglan, but with terrifying looks. They are the dressing maid and the roller blind. The ancestors of the 2 lines of Red Suzhou are each the owner of a King Nadongshan and a heavenly blessed land. Because the 2 Dao lines are not regarded as an orthodox relationship, they hardly communicate with the outside world. This time they are both candidates on the list. It is a horror of the world. Mizhou, the founding emperor of the Hengyang dynasty Luo Yi, was named Fire Officer. Yushan country in Peizhou, Shade Ho Wuxi. Bone real person. A monk at Hongfu Temple in Yenzhou, his dharma name is Weiji, and his common name is Chen Tongxing. Jiangxiu. Huang Jieshou Mrs. Wei Jiang Zhaoma. Also. White Lotus Root, Zhu Moran, Baolin, Bailuo, Chaoga, Niebixia, Leiyu, Bone Reality, Yuan Huanxian, Wangxing, Yangqing, Wuxi, Luo Yi, Chen Tongxing, Sumian, Suingzhu. There are a total of 21 alternates, including 9 female sisters. Long Xinpu smiled bitterly. These 2 lists are actually just a piece of essay. Wang Sun nodded. Xiao Sun said the same. Xiandu Temple, Sui Chu Gong, Di Lung Mountain, Huayang Palace. There are Sun Huaizhong, Wang Sunday, Wu Shuangjiang, Bailuo. Gaogu. There are 2 monks, Jiangxiu and Chen Tongxing. The situation of monks and temples in the Qingming world can be imagined. In addition, LV Bixia, Baolin, Yangqing from Hongnong Yang family, Su Mian from King Nadongshan, Su Yinglan from Taiyamafuti, because of their life experiences, family origins and treatments they all did not deal with by Yujing. In the past selections there were those who greeted the Xianzhang faction in advance, and took the initiative to ask not to be included in the rankings so as not to be burdened by fame, provoke unnecessary friendships, or exchanges of Taoism for no reason. Of course there will also be mountain monks who have made a name for themselves, or because of some self-interest considerations, they must sharpen their heads to fight for a place. The latter are mostly dynasty emperors or some Taoist temples that are at the bottom of the top sections. Master Zongmenzu. One is to attract talents and heroes from various states, and the other is to be able to absorb more immortal materials from outside the mountains and cultivate the embryos of Taoism. But this time it's not the handwriting of the fairy stick faction. How can you say hello? Many people who might not want to be on the list at all have been on the list, and many who want to be on the list can't find the temple with a pig's head. On the top of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Lu Chen and Xiaomo hit it off as soon as they met, and they talked about the Qingming world. At that time, Master Lu casually mentioned the names of more than a dozen masters, and most of the strange men and strangers who were mentioned in the end. Comment. From this it can be seen that Zhang Jiaolu often stood on top of the railing at the highest point of Baiyujing, either basking in the sun or admiring the moonlight. The customs of the world are indeed not in vain. 21 people headed by Jianghu. All of these people are only on the waiting list. It happened that Xuandu Guan Wang Sun was placed on the top 10 list. It also happens to be the 10th place in the world, tied for the 2. Wouldn't it work to put Wang Sun on the 11th? Sure. Even in Long Zinpa's eyes, as long as Wang Sun did not enter the 14th realm in one day, she would be one of the candidates at most, and there was no way to compete with Jiang Xiu for the 11th. Others don't know Jiang Xiu's details and swordsmanship, but Long Xinpu knows it well. This is tantamount to deliberately roasting Xiandu Temple on the fire. Within one case there are 2 top 10 in the world. Except for Baiyujing, there has never been a feat in the history of Qingming. The Qi Xiandu Temple is notoriously different from Baiyujing. The Xiandu Temple is not the same as Daifishan Huayang Palace. The latter has at least had that kind of hatred and can still maintain face with Baiyujing. It's okay, but because of Sun Daochang, it is recognized by the world that they dare to openly break the top spot with Baiyujing, and then Sui Qugong and Wu Shuangjiang. If it were the handwriting of the Xianzhang faction, Long Xinpu would definitely not let Wang Sun on the list, and even the alternate would be useless. After all, Bingjishan and the Xianzhang faction were old neighbors in the same territory of Yongzhou, and Long Xinpu was a soldier again. The monk with the highest generation of Xieshan, and several old ancestors of the Xianzhang sect, are very familiar with each other and have a personal friendship. The reason why Xian Duguan had forged a death feud with Baiyujing was precisely because he was fighting with the head teacher Yu, because he had the Haven's hatred. It lies in the pair of masters and apprentices of Xian Duguan, Huanggan and Song Maolu. This pair of masters and disciples, one is named Qingli, and the other is respected as Master of Song. But when the former was still alive he didn't even enter as an alternate. Song Maolu was a candidate for the review. The reason why the Song Master of Yongzhou's Master of the Nations was not ranked high and failed to rank among the top 10 people in the world. It is said that he was a fairy stick. The sender did it deliberately so as not to attract the wind. But even so, in the end there was the tragic Yongzhou. In the battle of closing the position, since then, there has been an extra line of rice thieves scattered around the world. And that Huanggan, as the younger brother of her and the old Guanzhou, died in Yudou's hands, and Huanggan still died in the Xuanduguan. So before going to Yongzhou, Long Xinpu planned to take a detour to go home and take a trip to Xianzhang Pai. It is to select a more convincing 10 people in the world. Simply put, in addition to being persuasive, you also need to have a bigger gimmick that can attract more eyes and topics, and cover the influence of the previous list. With Wang Sun's temperament, even if she is the 10th under heaven, she would never give it up. Even if he knew the murderous intent of this essay, Wang Sun would only accept it calmly, nothing more than a sword. To say that through letting Xuandu Guan's Dibao say some vague remarks, he is like an angry little wife, and it is a big joke. Both guilty and futile. It is easy to explain more and more suspicious sinuses, which will only backfire. And this is definitely not in line with the consistent style of Taoist priests in Xuandu. Wang Sun said, "It's okay. When I reach the 14th level, people who watch jokes won't be able to laugh." Long Xinpu said miserably, "I hope you don't enter the 14th realm." Wang Sun is rare to be silent, and he needs to formulate his words there. Change my personal preference. Long Xinpu drank the wine in the pot and smiled freely. It's harder than getting Wang Sun to like me." Wang Sun was silent. Long Xinpu raised his head and whispered softly, "It's going to snow again. This heavy snow will be very heavy." If he put aside his selfishness, the picture of the mountains and rivers that has been slowly laid out on display would surely be spectacular. Long Xinpu got up to leave, walked slowly out of the peach forest, keeping the wind and mountains and rivers away, just leaving the peach forest step by step, slowly leaving the field of vision of the woman behind him. Sun Daochang came to the senior sister and looked at Long Xinpu, who had left sadly. Outsiders could not say anything about this kind of thing. Wang Sun suddenly said, "If Song Maolu was born in the awe-inspiring world, would it be better?" Daochang's son nodded, "Yes." After hesitating for a moment, Daochang's son said slightly bitterly, "If this kid had gone to Baiyujing early in the morning, maybe he would be a veritable master song teacher now. Wang Sun said, "The truth can't be said like that. I believe that Song Malu may resent Xuanhuan you and me. But he will not regret the matter of practicing in Xuanhuan." Sun Daochang hummed, "Obviously there is no doubt about it." Wang Sun said, "Since we know he doesn't regret it, those of us who are elders must feel more guilty." Daochang Sun said, "You can't slap yourself every day." Wang Sun said, "You can stretch out your face. I have 2 hands. How difficult is it to free one?" Sun Daochang laughed blankly. Sister still has such thoughts. The close disciple of junior brother Huanggan and his nephew Song Malu. The fragrance blooms outside the wall. In Yongzhou, which is not bordering Qizhou, stand on its own. The prosperous Dao pulse and the great momentum are worthy of the 4 words, unprecedented and unparalleled. Just because of the ups and downs of Yongzhou's unwinding battle, Xuandu Guan for some reason chose to stand idly by. It is said that Sun Huaizhong personally issued a decree that no one can leave Taoist temple and rush to Yongzhou to help Song Malu. Therefore the direct disciples of Song Malu died of death and escaped. In the end there were only a few people left. They were displaced, resembling a bereaved dog, and scattered in several states outside Yongzhou and Qizhou. It was difficult to gain a firm foothold, and pass down a few lines of Taoism with withered incense for the line of Shizu Huanggan and Shizhuan Song Malu. And these few Dao vain monks who are difficult to be climate hate Xuanhuan, the least bit is no less than by Yujing. The older the Taoist officials, especially the elderly who have experienced that battle, the more difficult it is to let go of Shendu Temple. One Yongzhou, one state, and all countries without exception, respect the country's teachers. Although Song Malu did not have the name of cultivating the ancestors, it has the fact that it is the leader of the religion. This is a feat that can be described as unprecedented. Similar to Lin Jiangxian, who was respected as the master of the forest, Song Malu was also called Master of the Song by the mountain instead of his Taoist name. Song Malu and by Yujing's Zhang Haifeng, who was nicknamed the Little Head Teacher, were once known as the Double Bai in the world. In the eyes of the outside world, the Taoist of Yongzhou is a glorious defeat. As the head teacher of Song Malu, he is still honorable even though he is dead. Song Malu would rather die than survive, and was detained in the Xianxia cave of Xianhu Palace in Baiyujing. It is said that Song Malu once said that poor Dao really wants to go to Baiyujing, neither as a guest nor as a prisoner, so he can only ask you about the sword. The reason why Sun Huaizhong took the initiative to go to the Qingxin dynasty to find Wang Yuanlu, who was born in the line of rice thief, the old Guanzhou also joked at that time that he was the ancestor of Wang Yuanlu, but in a certain sense, it was really complete. It's a joke. It's just that the line of the rice thief today is actually quite different from the Yongzhou Taoist priests back then. Most of them fished in troubled waters and they were secretive. In addition, this is a taboo for Baiyujing, and it is not recorded in Taoist temples and official history books. Over the years, the young Taoist priests of the rice thief line do not know their own Dharma line at all. Obviously they practice the Taoist orthodoxy. Why is it a rice thief? History is a forgetful old man, so history books are thin. Therefore, according to legend, there is an unwritten rule of the Zhushitang in Xuandu Temple, which is only passed down from generation to generation, and will not be recorded in the book. Do not fight back or curse, do not fight back, no matter if you have beaten or failed, don't do it anyway. It can be considered a unique strange thing. Xuantu watched Sun Huaizhong, dared to scold Baiyujing, and dared to scold the people of the world. Only the dozens of temples and temples in these Taoist veins, even if it is a Taoist boy who has just started, dare and will scold Sun Huaizhong. And Bingjishan, as the only top-notch group that made an open alliance with Song Malu in the past, although it seems to have been reminded by Song Malu in advance that it unilaterally tore the covenant temporarily, Bingjishan was not badly injured, but Bingjishan except outside of Long Xinpu, the perceptions of Sun Daochang and Shen Du Guan are all your Sun Guan has been practicing Taoism for thousands of years, and his swordsmanship has mastered the spirit. What else did you do besides cursing by Yujing without pain or itching? What do you dare to do? Daochang's son said, "Senior sister, let's forget about that matter." Seeing that the elder sister did not speak, Daochang's son continued, "The younger brother is the younger brother. On my side, Zhan Qing and Di Yuanfeng plus the 2 on your side, are all separate people. I believe the younger brother, I don't want us to spend so much time and effort." If the senior sister hadn't forgotten, at the beginning, some of our fellow students had discussed this matter specially. Only the young junior brother's thoughts were the most special and the furthest distance from our opinions. Wang's son leaned back against a peach tree, arms around his chest, raised his head slightly, and stared at Sun Huaizhong in a daze. It seems to be saying that the old lady has worked so hard for more than 1,000 years, and things are about to come. You tell me forget it? Xiaosun, are you going to be beaten or are you looking for a beating? This is different from in a latrine, and you don't need toilet paper to wipe your butt. Just thinking about it, Wang Sun felt very sorry for the younger brother. Sun Huaizhong bit his head and said, "Sister, listen to me." Wang Sun remained silent. Sun Huaizhong sighed, "Senior sister, what we do may make the younger brother even more unwilling, unworthy, and unhappy." Wang Sun retracted his gaze and hummed softly. Now it was Sun Huai's turn to be unsure, and he asked cautiously, "Senior sister can really let it go?" "It's nothing." Wang Sun murmured, "It was just that I suddenly found out that I almost can't remember the appearance of yellow oranges. I'm a little sad." It was just such a sentence that made the old Guanju immediately turn his head and dare not look at the senior sister again. Wang Sun waved his hand, "Don't disturb my practice and go cool." The old master nodded silently and came to a study that hadn't had a master for many years. In the study, there is a pair of couplets which are written by the younger brother. Pipa, yellow oranges, green plums, and lone cranes rushed to the southern sky, doing what they were supposed to do in the eternal class. The Penglai Ingzhou square pot, Shenzhen rides the wine down Beishan, to be an indispensable person in the world. Old storytellers and storytellers are no longer young, let alone those in the books. Old Guanju picked up the broom and dustpan over the corner, and began to clean the spotless study. After closing the door, Lao Guanju went to the hut on Bai Ye's side. He was not polite to Bai Yi and even cooked himself a pot of eggs. Old Guanju picked up a boiled hard-boiled egg. Bai also shook his head. Old Guanju took the egg and knocked it on the table, swallowing it whole mouthfuls and smiled vaguely. The younger brother reads the most and he has read a lot of Buddhist scriptures. Maybe he has read all the Buddhist books in the Qingming world. Of course, this has nothing to do with the number of Buddhist classics here. The old View master picked up a hard-boiled egg again and smiled. Break the ignorant shell, worry about the river, and relieve all birth, old age, sickness, death, sorrow and distress. Bai just sat across the table. After eating 3 hard-boiled eggs, the old master clapped his hands. The old man looked indifferent, paused for a moment and continued, "But if it's inevitable, it can only be this way." Bai also said, "Since I have thought so much, I still want to do so much." The old Taoist smiled knowingly, nodded and said, "It makes sense. Do what you should do in the eternal class and be an indispensable person in the world. If you treat it as something and many people, you must choose one of the two. Make a choice, then choose the first and the second." The children in the market have all played the game of eagle and chicken. The child on the tail is like a closed disciple of a master in a martial art, and the little brothers and sisters of the brothers and sisters. Yellow Tangerine Song Maulo. This pair of masters and apprentices. One is the Guanmen disciple of the presidency, and the other is the Guanmen disciple of the latter. The vast Xuandu temple failed to protect the two of them. Even if there are difficulties, it is not a reason. For so many years, Xiandu temple has been in the hands of Dao Chang Sunday. In fact, compared with Master Qingyuan Dao Chang, it has a much deeper foundation. Plant a towering tree that can be used for the coolness of future generations, or drill a well to build a pavilion for people to rest. No matter what it is, you have to do something and leave something. Old Guanju smiled and said, "Drink some wine?" Bai also said, "I only have a drink and Dao Chang's son can do whatever he wants." The old Guanju said, "1 cup is enough." The old man took out a wine jug and 2 wine glasses, which are all old things, even wine, and he has been reluctant to drink them. They have been treasured for many years. Bai also supported the tiger's head cap and drank the wine, but his face flushed all at once. The old View master can't laugh. Is this still the most proud white in the world? The old Guanju quickly finished a glass of wine and turned his head to look outside the house. Teenagers travel far away as if carrying the scorching sun, always full of moonlight on their shoulders. It seems that every day of the teenagers, a pair of eyes always looking forward to tomorrow, hoping for the day after tomorrow. It seems that all the past can be collectively called yesterday. Dreaming back to the juvenile cluster, I am also a juvenile. Bai Yi across the table. Perhaps this was the most proud of the vast world in the past. He didn't know, could not predict. Some of his poems were like written for himself. For example, for the world in my hometown, the most proud thing that once built the dojo on a lonely overseas island is that the sea passenger rides on the sky such as the bird in the cloud and disappears without a trace. For another example, for the Qingming world in a foreign land, it will be the sword flower and autumn lotus light coming out of the box. The old man squinted and smiled, his expression calm. After drinking a glass of wine, he asked Jian Bai Yujing, Sword of Coming Chapter 964. The book says that there is no permanent banquet in the world, but don't be afraid. The book also says, wherein life does not meet. Note 1. The guests were leaving Mishue Peak one after another, and the group with the largest number of people, mighty and mighty, took the Tongyin ferry that was just won by Qingping Jianzong and was heading to Taiping Mountain. In addition to Huang Ting, the new mountain lord who has no suspense in Taiping Mountain, there is also a guardian enshrined in Negative Mountain. Because Zhang Shanfeng wants to continue to travel to Tongyizhao, he can go with Li Baoping, who is planning to go to drive the mountain to sea. Pei Qian will be with Sister Aquarius. They are all carrying bamboo boxes and holding green bamboo sticks. In the attire for a long journey, I plan to go to Taiping Mountain first, and then to visit Pushen Yunkateng. In this way, Yi Yunyun simply asked Tan Rong and Xue Huai to return to the mountain gate first, and she also had to visit the old Taiping Mountain site. As a result, Zhong Kuei Eugene will also follow. When Zhong Kuei was a gentleman of Dafu Academy, he was very familiar with Taiping Mountain. As for that fat man, he had a legitimate reason to be a flower protector. Yuan Lingyan looked at this posture, this battle. Junior brother does not need to protect the way by himself at all. Yuan Lingyan left Tongyizhao first, but instead of returning to Padi Peak, he went straight to the sea and went to the barren world through Guishu to find Master Huolong. The Tongyin ferry slowly lifted into the sky, and after passing through the sea of clouds, it swam far away suddenly like a blue bird. Dressed in a green shirt, walking on King Shandu, discussing with the white-clothed teenager with a red mole on his eyebrows about the future store setting of the ferry, discussing whether to take the initiative to say hello to the patriarch of the world's Baozhai, come here to settle down. Next to them was a little girl in black, holding a green bamboo stick, carrying a golden pole on her shoulder, leaning against a cotton bag, and today she carried a new verdant bookcase. Chen Pingan originally planned to accompany Li Baoping and Pei Qian to Taiping Mountain, but just received a secret letter from a Confucian sage sitting in the sky. This made Chen Pingan have to return to Luapa Mountain immediately. You have to call Xiaoma together. As for the Fengyuan ferry that is still docked at King Shandu for the time being, next time you travel south, in addition to the southernmost Yuzhou Kashandu, there will be an extra Xinjia ferry that stops at the Baichengdu near the Yuguazang Mountain Gate. After all, Huanggeji and Yangxishan and Yunkus blessed land, according to the agreement, the income of the next 500 years will fall into the pocket of Qingping Jianzong's account. Especially the Inkstone Mountain, which produces the kind of Xinjia stone that developed the water dragon inkstone. The Inkstone Mountain is very large. Yu Guizhong and Jiang's artisans have been mining for thousands of years, and there is no sign of exhaustion. Cui Dongshan will send out to fish. Air, Taishanging and other talisman puppets, go to get the bottom, carefully explore and determine the stone reserves. This kind of thing is fair and honest, and there is no need to hide and tangle. Once the teacher is famous, according to the agreement, within 500 years the Yenshan Mountain and the mining rights are all owned by Qingping Jianzong. Moreover, thanks to Mr. Ye's promise to help build bridges with Dong Shuijing and the Department of Dailiho, plus the Cloud Cave Blessed Lanjiang family, it may be a quartet force who did this in partnership. The only fly in the ointment of inkstone trading is that Mr. Jiang is prepared to split all the proceeds with Jiang's 50/5. Cui Dongshan smiled and asked, "Sir, what do you think of Lu Yuzhou?" Chen Pingan said without hesitation, "Very good, he has ideas, he has responsibility, he is generous, and there is no habit of rich sons." Listening to Mr. Yu, Lu Yuzhou still has a brilliant pen, especially in his study room. This is a priceless famous painting, so I must appreciate it next time I visit the Lu family in Iazhao. Cui Dongshan cautiously said, "I always feel that Lu Yu's look at the eyes of the master sister is kind of that." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "A gentle lady and gentleman are so beautiful, it's nothing." Cui Dongshan endured and endured, but none of them held back. Why is that gentleman on the Qingping Peak side, and when he looks at Lu Yuzhou he smiles so insincerely, it's weird. Chen Pingan turned his head to look at Cui Dongshan, and said with an extremely insincere expression and tone, "Is there? I think I'm very kind." Cui Dongshan immediately pecked the chicken. Gentle, very kind, and very approachable. Chen Pingan sighed rarely and stretched out his hands and rubbed his face. In fact, Cui Dongshan was right. If it weren't for Lu Yu's decent, otherwise don't blame yourself, the anonymous guest Qing of the Lu family in Aizhou for being so polite. Cui Dongshan held the back of his head with his hands. Maybe the husband himself hadn't realized that there were only two people on the side of the big disciple Pei Qian, Li Huai and Chao Sunny. No matter how they got along with Pei Qian, the husband didn't mind at all. Don't worry, on Pei Qian's side the husband seems to have some kind of also the master and the father? In the final analysis, the subtle mentality of the old father is at the root of the problem. Cui Dongshan grinned and said, "The right guardian carrying the new book box is happy or not?" Millet grinned, "Haha, happy and happy." Cui Dongshan asked again, "You don't know if you are going to learn. How can you only hang around at the door of your house with your bookcase on your back? Look at the leader of the martial arts and the leader of the rudder." The shoulders of the millet grain swayed. Small officials, small courage, big mouth, can't swim far away, swim near and near. Cui Dongshan originally wanted to talk and wanted to make fun of a few words, but ended up being slapped by his husband. Cui Dongshan suddenly rubbed his hands and said with embarrassment, "Maybe I have to borrow 2 people from my husband and the last." Qin Pingan turned his head and smiled and asked, "How many? I didn't hear clearly." "Say it again, 20? Cui Dongshan said with a dry smile, "How can it be, now there are only a few members of the genealogy of Luapa Mountain, 20, which is too much. Last time the Lupo Mountain established the sect celebration, there were 43 members of the Patriarch Hall of the Patriarch of Jai's Peak. Among them, Du Wenxi and Pang Lanxi of Pima Zong from Luzhou and Beiju. And the 2 children Yu Qingzhang and He Xiangting have now escaped from the Ji Sifeng genealogy and traveled far beyond the other continents with the old sword-repairing Yu. As a result, Cui Dongshan directly poached a dozen of them in one go. If you don't talk about the number of people, just talk about this ratio. It is indeed unusual in the entire history of Howren." Qin Pingan kicked over and the big white goose immediately jumped sideways. Qin Pingan's face was dark and sneered, "Let's talk about them first." Cui Dongshan cautiously said, "Hongxia Yunzi?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Do you want the old cook?" Cui Dongshan said in embarrassment, "If there is, of course it is the best." As soon as Qin Pingan raised his foot, Cui Dongshan hurried to the side of the millet. Xiaomili scratched his face and reminded, "Brother, it's okay, it's not difficult to borrow or repay. But you can't pretend to be a grandson when borrowing money from someone, and be called to collect debts as the old cook said." He immediately became an ancestor. Cui Dongshan sternly said, "The old cook is still humorous." Qin Pingan said, "I will take Xiaoma back to Luapa Mountain soon, and the millet grains will stay here first, and next time I will go home with Fengyuan Fairy." The millet grain green bamboo stick tapped the ground, nodded and said, "Telling." After that, Qin Pingan went to Luabaotan to find Xiaoma, and then at the gate of Qingpingfeng Mountain he saw the couplet, and a group of people stepped across the archway building and climbed up the stairs, planning to take a trip to the place placed in Mixifeng. Changchundongtian, where Qin Pingan's short-lived dojo was once done, such a formal retreat, the walking pavilion in the Great Wall of Swordchi prison is the first time in the world. What Tianhuan took in her hand was enough to support a monk's proving to ascend. Cui Dongshan is obviously still unwilling to give up. "Sir, is it really not in Changchundongtian to break the border? Carrying a small to dig the foot of the wall, digging Hongxia and Yunzi as a hammer, digging up the husband, that is the real skill." Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "It doesn't mean much. It is no longer a matter of the aura of heaven and earth. Maybe when I re-enter the Yupu realm and come back from my travels, I will take another trip to Changchundongtian." Cui Dongshan asked again, "Wait until the husband returns to Aquarius Island, then I will start to prepare to preach for Chai Wu?" Qin Pingan nodded, "Whatever hastening is not going to reach the sky, what's going to encourage you, these truths you know better than me, so I won't talk to you, just say one thing, try to be more stable, even if you can't make Chai Wu rise to the sky in one step, directly to enter the Jade Pure realm, you must at least ensure that this practice does not hurt Chai Wu's Tao fundamentals. If someone needs to guard the pass, it will be better to pull on Miyu. If it is not enough, I can call Qing Tong again." Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "I really don't need this, I'm still relatively sure. It's just not appropriate to say something like this." After thinking about it for a moment, Cui Dongshan continued to ask, "Since the gentleman does not want to monopolize such a treasured land of geomantic omen, it is too violent if he does not use it. Apart from Chai Wu, do you want to bring King Sun Chun by Xian? Of course, Chai Wu is the one with the best qualifications. In addition, King Sun Chun and Bai Xian were also first-class sword fairy embryos. In fact, King Sun Chun's natal flying sword has a lower rank than Bai Xian in the Summer Palace, and it also has Yu Xiehui and He Gus Fei Lai Feng, and Pazi Ling. There is a certain gap, but no one would think that King Sun Chun's sword training qualifications are not the best among the 9 sword fairy embryos. Therefore, if there is no big accident, the future climbing road will be able to barely keep up with King Sun Chun's footsteps. There was only Bai Xian. There is no waist flying sword, only waist sword repair. Maybe this statement is a bit absolute. But as long as those cases are aside, it is a fact. Of course, if Qingping Jianzong pursues the maximization of interests, it means that the entire Changchundong Tian will be given to Chai Wu to practice alone. Maybe, once Chai Wu can really directly enter the Yupu realm, she may even become the youngest fairy realm in the history of the Great Wall of Sword xuanhuan. Jianxiu. In fact, this kind of thing is a customary rule in the mountains, and it has been disregarded. It has been proved that only this is the way to make the most profit. Otherwise, the more the younger generation of monks will share the gods' money and the treasures of heaven and earth, the final result will be. That is, everyone is becoming more and more mediocre, slow step by step, lack of stamina, and the gap is widened by geniuses of the same age. The reason why many second and third-rate mountain immortal mansions can be promoted to the sect of Zongzi head is that, besides the ancestor of ZTE, who opened the sect, who has excellent aptitude, it is often that the entire mountain is not hesitate to spend the whole mountain. Full effort. This statement is not an exaggeration at all. Chen Pinggan said, in addition to King Sun Chun and Bai Xian, in addition to Qing Chaolu, He Gu and Yu Xianhui, they have all moved to this place recently to practice. They only waited until they encountered a pass, then exited the cave and asked their masters for inquiries. The crux of the bottleneck in sword practice. Cui Dongshan asked, Mr. is deliberately pursuing a kind of equality? Do you want Qingping Jianzong to be in the same line as Luopashen? Qin Pinggan shook his head. No, it's just a kind of appearance of the result looks like this. Luopa Mountain is Luopa Mountain, Qingping Sword Sect is Qingping Sword Sect. Built. Qingping Jianzong wants to make Chai Wu, who is now a sword repairman, break through the boundary as soon as possible, while ensuring that there are no hidden dangers in the avenue, and let the children from the Great Wall of Jianxi by Xian and Sun Chun forcefully force. Speaking of breath, I know where and how big the gap is with the real genius. Jianxiu has a crux. Maybe he is not afraid of death. But he is afraid of losing. I just want to see, after they feel that they are destined to lose to Chai Wu, they may not even be able to catch up with Chai Wu in their lives, what will happen to their respective Dao Xian. In addition, once the little girl Chai Wu occupies Changchundong Tian alone, she breaks through the realm very quickly, first in the Yupu realm, then in the fairy realm, and even in the future ascending realm. She may become more and more lonely and uncomfortable. Bai Xian and the others are no matter how big they are, but if they don't see each other for a few days, it's as if they suddenly see Chai Wu in the upper 5 realms. Maybe in a few years they will be another stranger, Chai Wu, who are all too young. The aptitude is too good, so I am worried that Chai Wu will drink more and more alone in the future. Even if we are together, there is nothing to talk about. For a long time he will be farther and farther away from his former friends. This kind of distance on the path of heart is not if you find a chance to get close to the courtesy, you can make up for it, but you can't. Cui Dongshan nodded and said, Mr. is right. Cultivation of the heart is a long-term practice. Only with a clear Taoist heart and a pure sword heart can sword repair be possible. Qin Pinggan turned his head and looked at Cui Dongshan. Cui Dongshan was confused. Sir, it's true to my heart, am not the old fairy Jia, I never slap a horse. Qin Pinggan reminded, whenever money is involved you will deliberately pretend to be foolish, deliberately bend around and break a big deal with me. How much is Gu Yuqian on Qingping Jianzong's book now? I will maintain the world of Changchundong Tian in the future. Reiki, just drop the money, remember to cry poorly with me. Do you think I don't know that Pei Chen gave you the things that are nearby? Cui Dongshan sighed and said, Mr. hasn't known the prophet, he is observant of the details and he is insightful. The student, the first master of the Qingping sword sect, should be trembling. Millet blinked, staring straight ahead, not looking at the big white goose. Ha, flattery. After that, he took the children and walked into Xiadongshan and arranged the temporary dojos for each of them to practice. Cui Dongshan took out the immortal mansions from the white sleeves and took roots. Finally, Qin Pinggan said to Chai Wu, who was still next to him, Next, Sect Master Cui will temporarily serve as your preacher. Don't worry, it's the one who doesn't have the status of a master or apprentice. I will help you say hello to your master Wei Xian. You won't have any objections. It's the old rule to practice well here. Drink no more than half a caddy every day. Sovereign Cui will have a special wine cellar at your dojo. Chai Wu was very worried and said timidly, Qin Shanzhu, my drinks will be discounted in half in the future, from 2 bowls to 1 bowl, and I only drink 2 taels of wine a day. Because the little girl felt that she understood, Qin Shanzhu was suggesting that she had poor spiritual qualifications and was a little drunkard. Isn't she just a money-losing gadget that only spends money without making money? Qin Pinggan was stunned, waved his hand and smiled. No need, 2 bowls of wine a day does not matter. Chai Wu was dull and silent. Qin Pingan asked, Chai Wu, do you know that your cultivating qualifications are actually very good? Chai Wu said boredly, Master said that my spiritual qualifications are as good as his drinking. Cui Dongshan laughed loudly. This Wei Haoyang was really overwhelmed. He said this kind of on Chai Wu's side. Qin Pingan said helplessly, It's really good, I'm not kidding. Chai Wu raised his head, glanced at Qin Shanzhu, then lowered his head again with a hum. What a bad cultivating aptitude is needed to make Qin Shanzhu with such a good temper a little anxious. Qin Pingan rubbed his eyebrows. The headache was a real headache. Forget it, let Cui Dongshan get the headache. He really couldn't control the little girl's practice and couldn't teach it at all. In Fengyuan Ferry, Qin Pingan felt that it was difficult to teach a young girl who had just stepped into practice. After hitting the wall twice, he had completely resigned. I used to teach Pei Qian on the 2nd floor of the bamboo building, and then it was rare to volunteer to be a temporary preacher for Chai Wu, but on the side of the student Chao Qingyang, a flying sword mud pill. After placing Chai Wu in place, Qin Pingan climbed to the highest point of the cave and asked, Dongshan, your big disciple, has someone already chosen it? Cui Dongshan's eyes turned sharply. Qin Pingan said, I heard Lin Shui say that before you were near Dadu, there was a simple and honest young man by your side. You called him Brother Gao? Cui Dongshan stomped his feet, had to lift up his sleeves, shake vigorously, and threw out a dull boy with red lips and white teeth. Cui Dongshan scowled and said, High and Low, what are you doing in a daze? Hurry up and call Master Patriarch. The young man named High and Low, by Cui Dongshan had a timid expression and called out Master Patriarch. Qin Pingan was speechless and took Xiao Imo and Xiao Mili down the mountain. Cui Dongshan took the young man with the nickname Failed, and hurried to catch up with her husband and asked in his heart, Mr. Tong Yezhou, what about sacrificing the sword in the future? Qin Pingan said, You are the sect master of Qingping Sword Sect. You can figure it out by yourself. Cui Dongshan let out a cry and asked, Mister, are you going back to Luapa Mountain? Qin Pingan said, Go to the Earth Temple to worship incense before leaving. Cui Dongshan suddenly said, It's the guide agency, the temple is not big, but it has a long history, more than 1,000 years, and the incense has not been broken. It is very rare under the mountain. I will be with my husband. A group of people worshipped incense at the guide agency. The temple of the land is very small, and the temple is only for local people. Qin Pingan also invited a pair of incense candles. After leaving the guide, Cui Dongshan took the millet grains and the disciples of Kaishan, and said goodbye to his husband and Xiao Imo. Qin Pingan did not rush back north, but took Xiaoma for a walk. There were many persimmon trees near the temple of the land. A little further away was a large swath of reeds, with egrets flying by like persuasive words, persuading people and staying. If you want to come to this year's autumn, full of red persimmon trees, if there is a sunset, it will be a beautiful picture just like a narcissus wearing a light red shirt. Xiao Imo asked curiously, My son, why are you so anxious to return to Luapa Mountain? Hospitable. Qin Pingan looked weird, There is a guest from afar. Xiao Imo smiled and said, Is the one who came? Qin Pingan shook his head and said, That won't be true. The other party has to behave well, otherwise the price will be too great. Xiao Imo asked, Is it a 14th level cultivator or an ascension level sword repairer? Qin Pingan patted Xiao Imo on the shoulder and said solemnly, Im wronged you. Xiao Imo was confused and had already begun to think that he really wanted to ask the sword. He must stay away from Luapa Mountain, and it is best to leave the land of Aquarius Island and go to the sea. Together with Bai Jing, they met together to swim far down the river and land boundary, and they could be regarded as the master Bai Zhe who returned to the wilderness together visiting. As a result, the rebellion failed and Bai Zhe was beaten. Of course, this had something to do with Bai Jing's defiance. Not small but not too big. If Bai Zhe really wanted to clean up their group of fierce big monsters who had been extremely rebellious in the ancient years, it really had nothing to do with the number of each other. Previously, Bai Zhe ordered all the hibernating people scattered in various places to wake up. The girl, looking Bai Jing, now named herself Xiego. After all, she is a woman. It is a matter of taking a new name and changing the road number, such as changing clothes. In addition, Xiao Imo, who had been recovering from a round of bright moon and bright color, somehow ran to Howren World. She and Xiao Imo, both of them are ascendant sword repairmen, one is the pinnacle and the other is consummation. In fact, they are only half a step away. In addition, there was a glamorous woman with pale face and scarlet lips. She was thinly dressed and plump, but her eyes were cold and she kept away from people thousands of miles away. Now the pseudonym is Guan Yi, and the road name is Shuezong. She woke up from the Wanyan Glacier before, and killed all the creatures in the entire nearby huge city. Among them was an upper 5-level demon clan and several earth fairy monks, who could be promoted to the barbaric level against this strength. The ancient great demon on the throne had no strength to fight back, even unable to see her appearance clearly, and died. The monk's soul, with his soul and blood, all became the food of the official second. And when she came, she found a small country, including the capital, to have a good meal. Guan Yi noticed that Bai Jing was moving closer to him, and then the other party suddenly reached out to touch his chest, and Guan Yi had to gently pat off the opponent's palm. The girl with the mink hat sighed, "Well, it's tiring. Really, Guan Yi, you have to listen to my persuasion. If you hinder the fight, it's better to be small, otherwise it will be messy when you fight and it won't look good." Guan Yi smiled and said nothing. She has become accustomed to traveling with companions along the way. Standing next to Guan Yi was a young monk who always squinted and smiled, with a pseudonym Hutu. After being awakened by Baize's imperial order, the mountain that belonged to his line was intermittent with incense, and it was hard to maintain the sect of the Dao line. As a result, there was a frenzied mountain founder, and he waited until he painted an ancient painting from the ancestor hall. Walking out of the portraits of the mountains and rivers on the battlefield, there is one family Dao line, one sect, and in the end only a few cultivators of the lower 5 realms are left. The rest are all killed by him. The entire patriarch hall is now except for him. This old patriarch is already empty. The owners of more than a dozen chairs, because they were confused and respect the wrong incense, have all become the womb of the old patriarch. A boy with a heavy pupil alias Ligua, and his Dao name Flying Money. In one hurried effort, he took back the 8 treasures of the mountain with the rank of immortal soldiers. You must know that these fairy soldiers who were left in the wild in the past tens of thousands of years have been cultivated by various ancestors in upper 5 realms, and they have been refined into their own life. Therefore, as soon as this young appeared, all the fairy soldiers returned to their original owners, and instantly it was equivalent to severely injuring 7 wild demon races in the upper 5 realms, plus a young earth fairy who was famous in the wild world, and was regarded as a great road. It can be expected that the genius of Taoism, just because he can't bear the forced separation of his destiny, can be said to have suffered a catastrophic disaster, no arrogance and a lot of falls. It is destined to be hopeless in this life. The ancient great demon in the appearance of a young man, with a yellow universe bag and a gourd for catching a demon on his waist. The sun and the moon grind through the ages, and the universe is sent to one house. Once refining 2 human monks who are both ascending realms. An old Taoist man with a bamboo crown, riding a deer with a sword on his back. The pseudonym is funny, it turned out to be the Wang Youwu, but the Taoist name is not bad, Shanjun. There is also an old woman surrounded by clouds and fog, her body is rickety, and she is always gathering the heaven and the earth to make aura. Under the close look of the big monk, the short old woman, the weather is as majestic as a mountain. The mountains are divided into 5 colors, and there are countless golden thunders all over. Hilltop. There is also a small and slender man who seems to have not woken up yet, and has been yawning. In addition to being a great cultivator of the Ascension realm, he is also a pure martial artist, and he has reached the highest level. The relationship with Liku is very good. In the ancient years, the 2 parties often traveled the world together. The Taoist and scholar, who were personally killed by this man, were thrown into the bag of Liku's universe. Bai Jing has only 3 regrets in this life, one of which is not being able to concurrently study martial arts. The second thing is that you can't read the book. As for the third regret, Bai Jing rubbed the mink hat on his head. Hee, it's embarrassing. Except for Xiaomo's absence, Bai Jing, Guan Yi, Li Gu, Hutu and Wang Youwu were standing in front of Baize. And the guy who has never had a pseudonym, and may not even have the real name of the Yaozu. So Bai Jing helped him choose a name that was not a name, anonymous. Baize looked towards Li Gu and said, "There is a female crown Sanxian with the name of Taiyin, in the Qingming world, named Wuzhou, who is on the same path as you, but she has already taken the lead to enter the 14th realm." This ancient great demon with a heavy pupil just nodded stupidly, without seeing the slightest ripples in his heart. The Ascension realm perfect cultivator, who wants to be among the 14 realms, is afraid that there is already a predecessor on the single-plank bridge. Generally speaking, when encountering this kind of heavenly moat, it can only be Wei Shi of Ai Aijo, because there is no other way out, and his will is depressed. Otherwise it's like Lu Qi and still has the ambition to ask for another way, looking for the secrets on the marriage book, and for this reason he will cross the two worlds. Xiego glanced at the young man diagonally, and she uttered a series of tuts, gloating, "Her miserable." Xiego said more and more vigorously, "I can't blame others who made you eat and hold on back then, you have to compete with that scholar, otherwise there is nothing wrong with that Taoist ant, you are already 14th stage, I saw you on the road. You have to go around." The scholar who had fought with Li Gu, he was the proud student of the Most Holy Master, and he could even be said to be the most favored of the Most Holy Master. There was none of them. How could this person's fighting ability be lowered? Can't be said that Li Gu has lost too much. If you lose, you will definitely lose. However, in the end, both losers are hurt, and both sides failed to enter the 14th realm, especially Li Gu. Back then, in a small poking monster race monk, his qualifications it is the most top-notch. The key is that this guy has a bright mind and has many valuable treasures on him. No matter how you look at it, he is very likely to go further. You can stand side by side with Tua Yueshan Dazu and Bai Zhe on the top of the world. The teenager also squinted Bai Jing. Xiego blinked. "Ha! Don't be small, let's give you another chance to speak well." This Ligua liked reading so much that he had the nickname Silverfish Book Eater. It is said that he had an idea to create a dojo where Book City never sleeps. Therefore, under the 3 robes of the boy with a heavy pupil, are covered with tattoos. In the ancient years, Li Gu even became a half-hearted scholar for a while, but somehow, it seemed that there was an unpleasant quarrel with the bookkeeper and the scholar, so they parted ways. Then he had a big fight with the scholar holding the saber of the most sacred master. Is miserable, why not be miserable? Limu remained silent. Xiego had to make an inch of it, and instead he moved away if he didn't see it well. Girls and teenagers about the same height. Just face to face, staring at each other in a daze. This group of wild monsters with very old qualifications and very high generations. In fact, we all know each other's roots, what their respective methods are, what kind of magical powers they will use, and what their destiny is. They can't be concealed. On killing power, Wu Mingshi, Xiego Xiaomo. On defense, it is Li Gu, Xiego Xiaomo. The old bamboo crown riding a deer-backed sword could only persuade him and said, "Don't fight inwardly." Xiego took a step forward instead, and the foreheads of both sides were about to collide with that Li Gu. "Liquor, stay still." Xiego suddenly leaned forward and knocked the other's forehead with his head, but his strength was not strong. It seemed that both parties were just ordinary young girls, and Li Gu's head swayed slightly, not much. Li Gu finally spoke, his voice hoarse, "Bai Jing, you can get it almost." The girl with a mink hat and red cheeks suddenly smiled brightly. "You are an ascendant realm, and you are not a sword repairer, a small trash that is not powerful enough. What do you want to do with me?" In an instant, the liming was more than 8 pieces removed, and the whole body seemed to be cut into tens of thousands of pieces. Only in an instant, the boy's body was put together again, and then shattered in an instant, and then restored to its original appearance. Li Gu did not use any spiritual energy at all, nor did he sacrifice his life, so he soldered by himself, avoiding the inextricably dense sword energy. Bai Zhe said, "It's okay." Xiego then closed his hands and instantly gathered those sword chi. She didn't use Fei Jian either. It deserves to have learned a few unique tricks from that Taoist. The first cultivator in the world is really a talkative guy in the world, and he is not even one of the second. Because as long as anyone asks, he is willing to teach. Ask anyone casually, he is willing to teach everything. Moreover, he never hides his own personalities, he is willing to give everything to himself, and he has excellent patience. Therefore, when the Taoist priest walked around the world, he often followed a series of kikkomen on the back of his buttocks, often with elm heads. Those who are enlightened must either be thinking but do not understand the true meaning, and must continue to follow the Taoist priest to ask questions, or if they have gains and are stunned, they must always stay close to the Taoist priest so that they can be touched by the Taoist spirit. It seems that as long as you meet this Taoist priest on the road, you are his comrade. Bai Jing's roots and aptitudes are too good, and she breaks the realm too fast. It is almost as fast as the thunder. She is among the earth immortals, and then quickly into the ascendant realm, and because she is a sword repairer, she is not afraid of the sky, but she is not afraid of it, but there are not many, and there are so little things such as Bai Zhe. But if you want to say that she feels sincerely admired, I am afraid that there is really only the Taoist priest. For the monster clan monk, since he admires someone sincerely, of course he will be more afraid of someone. Bai Zhe said, "It's okay." Xiego curled his lips and put away his sword aura. Their group of poor worms who are now equal to the homeless, The common pursuit, of course, is the 14th realm that seems to be separated by one step, but in reality it is illusory. In addition, they have their own requirements. For example, the Taoist with a bamboo crown wants to find a master. What to look for? Step back 10,000 steps and say, I was really found by you. The Taoist back then didn't recognize you as a disciple. After 10,000 years he will change his mind? It's just that the Wang Youwu really wants to find this person. If the other party's status has changed now, and the realm is not high enough, then it is not a teacher to learn art. What can I do if I eat it? Bai Zhe asked the other big demons to find a foothold in the city, and when they went back to discuss matters, Bai Zhe only took Bai Jing for a walk along the Lulu River. But there is another ignorant person who insists on being the dragoil bottle. It is the sharp and fierce man named Anonymous by Bai Jing's help. Xiego looked back at the man and grinned. Fortunately, Bai Zhe is next to me. Otherwise, if I change to someone walking, I will recognize the unknown person behind as a son. He has no name or surname, so I will thank my surname in the future. Xiego retracted his gaze and said, Master Bai Zhe, I plan to take a trip to Beiju Luzhou first, and then go south to Aquarius Island. Do you think it is feasible? It's a pity that after taking a nap, the Great Wall of Sword Qi is gone. Fortunately, there is another place in Beiju Luzhou that is known as the swordsmanship. Nothing is impossible. Bai Zhe smiled and reminded, Thank you, I remember after the Aquarius Island, you must be especially careful not to reveal your whereabouts casually, let alone recklessly. Otherwise, if someone caught him accidentally across the world, I can't help and I definitely can't save you. Xiego frowned slightly. By whom? The man behind them smiled and asked, Could it be that the last hermit surnamed Chen has not returned the 14 realm Dao Fa? It would be interesting to dare to rely on Bai Yujing's 3 heads to teach Lu Qin if it is really not repaid. Unlike the great monsters like Bai Jing and Li Gu, he has actually been in a mysterious state of sleeping but not sleeping. 4,000s of years, except for one soul and one soul staying in the real body, the rest of the soul is like a wandering, long-standing history. Going out and changing places constantly. Because he is a military monk. Sit back and enjoy it. Therefore, when Bai Zhe called him this time, he had to come. Even if he doesn't have the real name of the Yaozu, he still has no chance of winning against Bai Zhe, who was one of the 4 candidates for the 10 under heaven in the past. Since you can't beat it, just admit it. Bai Zhe smiled and shook his head. It has something to do with the realm, but it has nothing to do with it. Xiego tut and exclaimed, Master Bai said so horribly, knowledge is all knowledge. Bai Zhe joked, Then I wish fellow Taoist Bai Jing this trip will be fulfilled. Xiego laughed, his body turned into a rainbow, and followed the long river of time given by Bai Zhe, breaking the sky and heading straight to the awe-inspiring world. To the north of Luzhou, Beiju, a saint sitting in the sky with a high crown and belt, with a clear face, frowned slightly, looking at the uninvited guest from the wild world. On the side of the Confucian temple, he gave an explanation, allowing this monster monk from the wild world to travel through the vast continents and rivers within the rules. Seeing that girl wearing a shabby sable hat and 2 blushes, she didn't have a monk atmosphere. If she didn't show up here, she would be the most ordinary Murano girl. With a solemn expression, the old master asked in a deep voice, Bai Jing, can you understand Zhongtu Yayan? Xiego grinned, I came here prepared, of course I can understand people. I scolded myself first and didn't give you scholars the chance to scold others. Xiego patted a satchel, there are books in it, bought from all over the wild world. Watching while walking, this is called traveling thousands of miles and reading thousands of books. The old master nodded, don't break the prohibition. Xiego waved his hand, it's necessary, it's necessary. She overlooked a continent, mountains and rivers, and heard that there are many heroes here, and she has always valued loyalty and despised life and death. If there was no sword repair in Luzhou North Ju, and a wave of aid to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, I am afraid that the big battle that I missed before would have a different ending. The old master said, according to the agreement, we will not stare at your actions all the time. Xiego was surprised, free, I must say thank you to the little master, oh now it's the saint of rights. The old master turned a deaf ear and reminded again, don't give the Confucian temple a chance to make a move. Xiego nodded and said, I know that people have to bow their heads under the eaves. I understand the truth. To disrespect others is also self-disrespectful. There must be no natural anger, no righteous anger. The old master sighed, these words, speaking from the mouth of a wild big demon, were really uncomfortable. Xiego still babbled over there, Just don't worry, I can't say that I can be a chivalrous man. By the way, if I unearth a few monster monks at the Confucian temple, I can't keep my account according to the rules and count my merits." The old master was dumb for a moment. This little girl is really the peak sword repairman of the Ascension realm 10,000 years ago, by Jing? Xiego laughed. "If you are in the wild, do you think I can talk?" Xiego said goodbye, and his figure fell straight to the ground, several feet high from the ground, and one suddenly hovered and fell to the ground. After that, Xiego really started to wander the mountains and rivers slowly, admiring the customs of a foreign country. Of course, to her, that wild world is not a hometown. "I saw a good-looking woman on the road, pretending to be a teenager, changed her voice a little and leaned forward to tease. The book says it well, the beauties are leisurely and they laugh so beautifully in Kaisang Chilu. There is also the xianxia of the emperor general who embraces Gaoya, walking slowly on the official road, with a vigorous momentum. Xiego would often sit on the branches of the mountains, dipped his saliva and flipped the pages of the book. That guy now called Xiaomo, when he hid in Bixiao cave and walked out of Luobao beach, he turned into a bad old man. Alas, it made her feel distressed. Before, the skin was so handsome, the white clothes fluttered, and he traveled far away alone with a sword. In the words of the current book, it was unique and unique in the world. Anyway, it's all about each other's eyes, and Bai Jing just looks at it and likes it. Even if Xiao Mo never actively recruited bees and butterflies back then, he still provokes a lot of love debts. Of course, those women and ants who don't have eyes have been asked by Bai Jing to talk to them. Actually, just like Bai Jing said, he may not really like it much, but it's boring. Practice? Does she need to practice seriously? The sky is high and the earth is wide, so you have to find something to do. In addition to this, Bai Jing once said he heard something, the Taoist and the Qi trainer explained the truthfulness. It is said that a monk has many tricks and shortcuts to maintain his instinct while climbing. One of the ways, to put it more popularly, is the word love and hate. Whoever loves or hates anyone, it's okay. As for why the Qi trainer wants to maintain this kind of authenticity, according to a vague statement given by the Taoist priest in the early years, it is a kind of wandering. Xiego concealed his qi all the way and condensed all his sword aura. Except on the way, she was indeed exactly the same as a secular girl. She even achieved the original intention of, when you reach Howren, you will start to make money again. Occasionally she had to dig up some mountain herbs and the like and go to the mountain market to exchange some silver. She would not bargain, or the bargaining was too fierce at first, which scared the customers away. After a few losses, let the black-hearted businessmen make their own bids. In this way, Xiego gradually bought himself dresses, pots and pans, drinks and so on. If you catch a glimpse of a wild goose in the sky, you will stand up from the ground, grab the paws of the wild goose with both hands, and swim long distances together. Although Howren can fight in the world, almost all go to the wild world, just like this Beiju Luzhou at the foot. The real fire dragon, who is said to be a local bearer, is not at Litafeng now. But Xiego was still stubborn and determined not to cause trouble. In the downhill market, Xiego didn't care about them as he encountered some rogues who liked to go around the Ghost Gate. After all, I heard that the Confucian temple is now in charge of food. Isn't it a lesson for you to stop that ant? Alas, a lesson from the past. This is a good argument. There are so many books in the world today. Anyway, find the coward first before talking. If it weren't for fighting now, the first local snake she would go to for a while would be Bai Shang, who was known as the first person to repair swordsmanship in the north. Of course, it wasn't about the sword. Asking a junior who was not in the Ascension realm about the sword, bullying was not. On the ridge of a Taoist palace, Xiego hides his figure, sits cross-legged, and sips a little wine with the sauced meat, watching the little Taoist boys who are holding the whisk and walking in circles. Woolen cloth. According to the introductions and explanations in several books, today's Taoist priests are much more numerous. The so-called Bugang Tado, there are also more and more Huatu Sutras. Taoists walk in turn, worship the stars and ask God to come true, just like stepping on the Gang Star Do. From the earliest 3 steps and 9 trails, the constellation continues to evolve and become more and more complicated. If the stepping is combined with the pinch, there are more than 1,900 rumors. Xiego touched the mink hat, shook his head and muttered, "The more tricks, the smaller the meaning." Xiego had personally seen someone who was one of the top 10 candidates in the world, transformed into a bird to preach, and seemed to have this technique. That is the real ancestor. It's boring to watch the children walking on the trail. Xiego drank a pot of wine and moved a position. He came to a market stall and squatted to the side. As for the glutinous rice cakes, Xiego had eaten glutinous rice several times before, which was quite gluttonous. After crossing the sea quietly, Xiego came to Aquarius Island, and first took a trip to Dali capital city, and learned some Mandarin, which is the elegant dialect of Aquarius Island. Xiego finally stood outside an alley, as if inside was the house with embroidered tigers. She held a greasy pig's knuckle in both hands. Above the small alley, there was a shabby dojo the size of a snail shell. A pair of masters and disciples was nested inside. The old monk glanced at her and Xiego pretended not to know. The old monk may be older and a little confused. He secretly asked the obviously younger disciple whether he knew who the little girl outside the alley was and if there was any background. If the little girl walks into the alley, she needs to stop. After thanking the dog, he quietly went to take a look at Longquan Jianzong. Mainly I heard that Ruan Xiong was the chief worshipper of the Dai dynasty, and it turned out to be a jade pure realm, but the sword-making skills were not bad. There was a young sword repairman in the mountains who was not high in realm but weird. He even noticed his prying, and the two sides looked at each other from a distance. I always feel that something is wrong. Xiego didn't think deeply. Finally came to Longquan County, Huaihuang County, Dalichu Prefecture. This way, except for the young sword repairman of Longquan Jianzong, it was a bit interesting, as if he hadn't seen a real big man. Xiego followed the rules here and walked on foot. He walked all the way south from Zhouqing to the small town, found a shop at the bottom of the steps, and bought some cakes to eat. After that, I walked to the Luapa Mountain. Aha! You wait in blocking the door. Fallen Mountain. Mountain Gate. The new janitor of Luapa Mountain, a fake Taoist priest with a wooden hairpin on his head, was sitting on a bamboo chair with Erlang's legs upright, flipping through the book sneakily there. The mink hat girl, who was still some distance away from the mountain gate, raised her hand and rubbed her eyes vigorously. She had already seen no surprises and her face was still full of weirdness at the moment. Is there such a coincidence in the world? What are you afraid of? Xiaomo, you really belong to you. This is a bit too much. Back then, I hid in the Bixiao cave of Luobaetan to make wine, but now it's good, so I just hid directly next to this Taoist priest? My love road is really bumpy. Distressed. Sleep. Bah, it's so difficult to make a couple. Xiego curled her lips, displayed a magical power, and her figure split into two. She suddenly snorted and looked around. Could it be that Bixiao cave master is in this mountain? We Xianhui Taoist, we have always watched and listened to all directions, but found that the visitor came near the gate of the mountain, came and ran away. The result ran and came again. At this moment, Xianhui was completely confused. Seeing that young man with a mink hat, or maybe a girl, finally seemed to have made up his mind, and slowly walked towards the mountain gate. Xianhui quickly put the book in his arms and stood up. As a result, the man in the mink hat took a detour and moved to sit on the other side of the table. There used to be Taoist priests who wandered around the world. In addition to preaching for others, they would also build resting places next to the road, similar to pavilions for later generations, leaving a piece of Taoist text on the wall. Those who are predestined see it, get it, and practice it. Because in the eyes of Taoists, all sentient beings in the world can cultivate the Tao. What is going for the sky? Probably this is the most veritable thing, right? Xiego sat at the table, sighed faintly, restrained his mood, raised a smiling face. Xianhui found that the other party looked at him blankly with a very complicated look. You won't find yourself to recognize relatives, right? The problem is that I haven't really become lavish. When the concierge of the Luapa Mountain, the salary is a little bit, but every snowflake money in my pocket is of great use. Where the duty was, Xianhui had to walk over and asked with a smile, "This fellow Taoist, do you want to drink tea?" Xiego asked, "Do you want money?" Xianhui smiled and said, "No money." Xiego smiled and said, "Then 2 pots first." Xianhui was confused again. On the Luapa Mountain, Zhu Lian sat in the courtyard weaving a basket, with Bai Jing's true body sitting beside him. The latter was the original one. He talked about the cause of the incident with this thin old man who seemed to be in charge of the Luapa Mountain and called himself Zhu Lian. It's so concealed, but there's nothing to be seen anyway. It comes from the wild world, the monster sword repairer, the ascendant realm. He used to be called Bai Jing, but now he is called Xiego. Come to Xiaoma to talk about the old. There is no need to worry that she will cause trouble on Luapa Mountain. She didn't dare to provoke the master Bai Zhe and the little master to get angry because none of them could be beaten. The old man always looked kind, and after listening to Xiego's self-introduction, instead of any fear, he smiled and nodded without delay. He was skillful in knitting baskets, and then he said the first sentence. Shocked, thousands of sales are nothing. At that time the only way is common. Then the old man's next words made Xiego feel relieved and sad. When the old man spoke, he spoke slowly, not eagerly or slowly, and had an unclear charm. Thank you, girl, cross mountains and seas, come to find your sweetheart. Very good, the only thing you need to pay attention to is probably not to scare Mr. Xiaoma. In men's and women's affairs, whoever tempts first, who suffers, the more you suffer, the harder you will forget. In the end, I don't know if I like the other person or I like myself. The answer lies with the other person. That's why I said, love comes from worry. Xiego rubbed his mink hat. The old man beside him was an expert. It's just that Xiego thought about it but still had a little disagreement. He first went to the countryside to learn from the vast world, and called the other person Mr. Zhu and then said, it's not about love, I have never had bitterness and hatred. The state of mind, there is nothing to worry about, I just think Xiaomo looks good, his realm is not much worse than me, if we are together we can grow for a long time and we are both sword repairers and we have conversations. Julien couldn't say anything. He smiled and asked a question that Xiego couldn't think of when he broke his head. Miss Xie, if someday Mr. Xiaomo really likes you, would you still like him? Xiego froze for a long time, thought about it carefully and said, I still like it. Julien asked again, why did you like it in the first place? Xiego patted his mink hat and complained a little, Mr. Zhu, I've said that Xiaomo thief is pretty? Wrong. The old man sitting on the bamboo chair weaving the basket, smiled and shook his head and said softly, I don't know how to worry about this body, but I am most afraid of being gentle. Note 1, this sentence was copied from the snow. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.